lied. Any minister, whether it's the most important one, the Prime Minister, or the most junior minister, lying to the House of Commons is a capital offence and would have to go. And if the officials have lied when they're advising you, they should go.
On the 10th of September, the Prime Minister misled Parliament by saying the full due process was followed. If Mandelson failed the security vetting, full due process was not followed. Misleading Parliament is a resigning offence.
The Ambassador has repeatedly expressed his deep regret for his association with him. He's right to do so. I have confidence in him, and he's playing an important role in the UK.
It's the
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good morning. Yes, Ian Collins in for Jezza. For today and Friday, not tomorrow, by the way, whole different story, tell you more later. Lots going on. It's a busy show. Are we moving to the end game of the Mandelson saga? Of course we're not, and neither should we be. The studious and quietly spoken Olly Robbins had his say. We know that Starmer has had his say, but we're no further on, not really. The one thing we do know, and why we'll forever come back to this headline, is that Downing Street absolutely knew 7 months ago about the security vetting issue. They knew. We also knew they put lots of pressure on Olly Robbins and the Foreign Office to get Mandelson through the door. And connected to this, we learnt yesterday that Number 10 also wanted to smooth the path for another Labour staffer to get a big job as an ambassador. Turns out another Labour person whose best mate was a convicted paedophile. What is it about this government that loves to appoint friends of convicted child sex offenders? Details to come. Elsewhere, a new poll says that half of young people say they would never fight for their country. Is this a crisis of patriotism, a loss of faith in the country, or simply a different generation with different values? And what about this? The war in Iran is having, as we know, a knock-on effect in the cost of living crisis for all sorts of reasons. We learned today that the world's biggest condom maker is now warning prices could rise because of disruption linked to the Strait of Hormuz. The contraception industry has been hit really hard. We'll have more on that story. Oh, and pupils should be allowed to wear tracksuits in the classroom because it's better for removing barriers. Bit of uniformity. Whip out your trackie. Vicky Pollard. Speaking of Vicky Pollard, we've got Charlie Rowley here, who's kind of male Vicky Pollard, really. Full tracksuit.
But I think that was the phrase.
That was the one, yeah. That was the one. Did you, I would imagine you probably went to quite a nice school, Charlie. A uniform was a big thing, was it?
It was for me, I'm afraid.
Did you wear one when you didn't have to?
No, but I was always very keen to make sure that my tie was the right length at school.
Really?
And I went to my local comp. We're from Hertfordshire, and so my comps in Hertfordshire might have had a bit more of a discipline to them. I don't know, but I loved a uniform, I have to say. I did.
Do you know what I didn't have? And I don't know why I didn't. So blazers were optional at our school, at our secondary school. And I didn't have one, but I envied the kids that did because they had somewhere to put their pens and, cigarettes and stuff. It's just a very handy thing to have, which is why I'm a bit of a fan of the man bag, although I rarely have one other than through work. But envy women in that respect, because there's always somewhere to put your accoutrements.
Yes, yeah. Well, when I was in year 7, so 11 years old, we were told then, we had to ask, even though it's state school, to take our blazers off. If we wanted to take them off, you had to raise your hand and ask.
Really?
Can I take my blazer off? That was a sort of form of discipline, I think. In the,
which is a bit tough when it was swimming lessons, wasn't it?
Yes. At the deep end.
Can I take this off now, sir? Get in. Trunks, blazer, standard fare, Rowley. Let's go back to yesterday. I said at the beginning, slightly tongue-in-cheek, are we moving to the end of the Mandelson saga? Well, we're clearly not. Firstly, we've got PMQs today, so it's bound to come up again. from Kemi Badenoch, even though they had 3 hours in the Commons on this yesterday. And, of course, we wait the latest tranche of documents coming from the Met Police. That's largely a separate issue to this, the appointment specifics. Is Starmer somehow, curiously, in the clear?
I'm afraid he isn't. But
I'm so afraid.
It was, yeah. But the pendulum of public opinion has swung from left to right, because of course when the Prime Minister first says, I wasn't aware, I wasn't told that Peter Mandelson had been recommended not to be cleared by this group of people that we now know as the UKSV, small group of people that's an arm's length body, but a very tight-knit group of senior officials that do all the vetting.
Really.
The Men in Black, exactly. The fact that they had not recommended Peter Mandelson for clearance, you would have thought, naturally, the Prime Minister should be aware of this. Why isn't he? And so there was a bit of, oh my gosh, okay, he's using that as an element to sort of get off the hook. But now, as you rightly say, on the back of Olly Robbins's the former Foreign Office Permanent Secretary yesterday, giving his account of why that wasn't the case, and actually it is a vetting system that takes place, but they do not recommend or take away people's level of clearance, and we're talking about Peter Mandelson getting the highest level of clearance. That is a decision for the Foreign Office, because they can decide themselves whether they can mitigate those particular risks, and also that if you start talking to, whether it's the Prime Minister or anybody else, about individuals' security clearance and their forms and the process and the interview that they go through, you are widening the pool of information about a particular individual, which is a risk to national interest. And by the way, we were under pressure from Number 10 throughout just to appoint the man. So the idea that Starmer can just simply hide behind the idea that he wasn't told about a particular document throughout the vetting process, and I would never have appointed Peter Mandelson, that doesn't add up.
It doesn't. So the words don't add up, because he was very unequivocal about due process. It was all done, blah blah blah, all of that business. His officials at that time, certainly the Cabinet Office, and one would assume by extension Number 10, knew, because a journalist told them. If nothing else in this story, to me this is absolutely pivotal. David Maddox from The Independent called them up and said, I'm hearing that there's an issue around the security vetting. Now, journalists don't reveal their sources. I'm trying to work out whether that... I can't imagine somebody in the Foreign Office would have told a journalist that. So it's likely it came from the Cabinet Office, which means that the Cabinet Office were told something by Olly Robbins' department.
Well,
how did that information get to the Cabinet Office?
So, and you're absolutely right, because they're, all departments are trying to work together on how, how you approve someone's vetting clearance. And so when the Foreign Office concluded its vetting process on Peter Mandelson, it handed that all of the file, some of the paperwork in which Olly Robbins said even he didn't see.
Even he didn't see, which I find a bit curious, to be honest.
Yes, people will, but his defence, which I thought was perfectly legitimate when you sort of think about it, is that he came into the role after the appointment of Peter Mandelson had been announced, but B, he'd been a career civil servant for about 25 years. He'd been the Deputy National Security Advisor, of which he hadn't seen the paperwork of many of those people before, because he was trusting a process by which you can mitigate things. Or he said he'd been involved in conversations where he had removed people's security clearance. So he's been around a long time to know how that system works. But you're absolutely right. When that file had been completed about Peter Mandelson, and Olly Robbins' account is that when he was told that it was borderline, but the risk could be mitigated as he saw it.
Looking at it in the round.
The entire file was then passed to the Cabinet Office, which is sealed, so nobody really has access into it unless it's absolutely necessary, until which then the whole story has blown up about Peter Mandelson. Somebody in the Cabinet Office has now opened that file and released all kinds of bits of paperwork to say, oh, here's something, Prime Minister. Potentially, they're saying, this Prime Minister, we can use this as a document to say why you're in the clear. You weren't told about this piece of information, were you, Prime Minister? Oh, no, I wasn't. And I'm furious about it. And so it's come from the Cabinet Office. I think you're right.
That's true. But where did David Maddox get it from? I'm not asking, not specifically, because that's his source, but one would assume he got it from the Cabinet Office.
Either the Cabinet Office or Number 10. I'd be pretty sure about that. Because
but that was 7 months ago. So 7 months ago, he rang Number 10 and said, is this true? So it can't have been, well, one would assume the person he was talking to at Number 10, which was the then Director of Communications, saying, look, I've heard that Mandelson didn't quite make it through in the conventional sense of the vetting. He had that information last September. And it was the splash on their newspaper.
And whether it was the specifics or the specificity, easy for me to say, of the crossing of the boxes. So we've seen that document where it's sort of, green, amber, red as to whether this UKSV, this arm's length body of independent people that are doing the initial recommendation, whether David actually knew that the boxes had been crossed in the red column to say Peter Mandelson was a high risk and shouldn't be awarded. It still remains unclear, because even the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, Emily Thornberry, had to slightly backtrack, where she sort of said, we were told that there's this document, and we've seen the template of the document, but no one has actually seen the crosses in the box by those UKSV vetters.
Could be ticks.
Or ticks, absolutely.
Yeah.
Or
smiley face.
Or unsmiley face.
This is how satisfactory was your service. Some little face going up, down, somewhere in the middle.
Exactly. So no one has actually seen that. Yeah, that has not been...
But David Maddox had seen something curious enough to call Downing Street and say, what's the deal here?
And it could have been, it could have been arranged for anything. It could have been the former Chief of Staff, former Director of Communications, flexing their muscles. If they were the ones that, putting the pressure on the Foreign Office to just get this done, they could have easily had a conversation to say...
OK, so the likelihood is then, Charlie, that somebody in Downing Street knew.
Yes.
Somebody certainly in the Cabinet Office knew, and the geography is the Cabinet Office is almost bolted on to Downing Street, so, it's down the road, as it were, quite literally. I'm assuming it's still in the same place.
Yes.
Just moved to Bedfordshire or something.
There is a connecting door. There
you go, you see. So they knew. So the people that didn't tell Keir Starmer were his own staff, not Olly Robbins.
Yes. Yeah, and absolutely. And that's why I think the ball is now very much, and all eyes on Keir Starmer this afternoon at PMQs, where he, as you're absolutely right, he's repeatedly said due process was followed. And no, he didn't mislead the Commons. And that he was furious about not being told about that particular part of Peter Mandelson not getting, not initially being approved or recommended for security clearance. However, the pushback is all of those things. Somebody in Number 10 knew about it. You also had a briefing from the Cabinet Office, from the Propriety and Ethics team in the Cabinet Office, that gave you a briefing which listed all of the involvements of Peter Mandelson, whether it's business involvements, whether it's still the relation to Jeffrey Epstein. That should have been enough on its own to not appoint Peter Mandelson. It shouldn't all hang on this one particular piece of vetting that was part of the process, the wider process of appointing Peter Mandelson.
And this does come back to the most fundamental question, really, as to why Keir Starmer wanted Peter Mandelson. Because the reality is, and I was listening to Alistair Campbell talk about this, Starmer didn't really know Mandelson that well. I mean, obviously their paths had crossed, but he wasn't part of that original collective of Blairite lovies, or, even Brownite lovies to a certain extent. So why was it so important that Mandelson got the job? And it was interesting yesterday, Ed Miliband was doing the rounds, and I think he let a lot of cats out of a herd of cats. What's a collection of cats?
Cats.
Is it just cats?
Cats, I suppose.
You're going to stick an S on it and claim it's a collective noun, Charlie.
Well, it's a collection of cats.
A collection of cats. A cattery of cats. It's a litter of cats. Is it a litter of puppies?
We'll have to.
Does that not just apply when they're babies?
Babies, yes. A litter, yes. But
the amount of subjects we cover in 15 minutes here is extraordinary. Anyway, he let a lot to out of the bag. A shed load of cats came out of that bag yesterday. Ed Miliband wasn't really holding up. This was really telling. Have a listen to him talking to Good Morning Britain yesterday, and you can just hear it in his voice. His position, as we now know from what he's been saying, was quite clear from the off. So this is all around why the heck did they so desperately want Peter Mandelson? Have a listen to this.
Look, it was a very risky appointment, and it turns out to be been extremely risky for all the reasons that we now know.
I'm not sure. If I'm watching you, I'm not sure what else anyone needed to tell the person at the top of government about this individual that would have made it clear it wasn't just risky, it was wrong. What else did you need to know at that moment?
Well, look, it's a fair point. I mean, look, it's a fair point, and he shouldn't have been appointed. That is right.
It was a rare moment of slight respect for Miliband there, because a very rare moment, because it's almost as if he went, you know, I'm done with this toe in the line. Let's just all fess up. This was ridiculous. This was a stupid appointment. Forget all the stuff about Epstein that we didn't necessarily even know. Well, we did, but even if you parked that, all of the other elements of Mandelson to be our biggest hit, what was the dire need to get him into that job? And Olly Robbins said it yesterday, you know, there were constant phone calls saying, have you done this vetting yet? You know, we need to make sure we've ticked every box.
Yeah, I mean, and the answer is that the desperation that's clearly was felt in number 10. The desperation to get Peter Mandelson into the job because of and we know that Morgan McSweeney, the chief of staff at this time, was very keen on that appointment. The chap that's now lost his phone. Or had his phone allegedly stolen because...
He's the victim of a theft, Charlie.
Victim of a theft.
Sorry, understanding the poor man's can happen to anybody, even to a former staffer, senior, in Downing Street with a phone that's hotter than the centre of a volcano in terms of what it contains. Let's have, on that very point, let's have a listen. Olly Robbins, on that point of the pressure on him and his department to approve this.
Morgan McSweeney, the chief of staff, rang Sir Philip and said, in terms stronger than those that I can use before the watershed.
I think you should.
Well, I'll just say that it was just to prove it with terms stronger than that.
Just prove it.
Does it accord with your impression when you took over from Sir Philip?
Certainly, Philip's handover to me has contributed to my strong sense that there was an atmosphere of pressure and a certain dismissiveness about this DV process, which I hope I've tried already to be honest with the committee about. I don't remember Philip using those words. Also, I'm proud to say Philip's probably not the sort of person who would report them verbatim.
Yes. I love the fact that the MP didn't want to say the F word. But Thornbury, and I know this because where I used to work, I found myself having a cigarette with Thornbury outside the studios one day, and she could be salty.
Yes,
put it that way. She was very pleasant. Probably great fun. Like a lot of these lefties, you know. Get a few beers inside them. They're quite fun.
Yes, yeah,
in a curious way. Yeah. But there it is. Just effing approve it.
Yeah.
That was the mood music. It seems. I don't think I'm over-representing or misrepresenting Olly Robbins here. The mood music was that this was a constant.
Absolutely, and he talked about, you know, all that pressure coming from private office to private office. So that was number 10 officials calling the Foreign Secretary's office and the Foreign Office officials to say, just get it done. Yeah. And this was after, as I say, you know, Olly Robbins came in after the appointment had been announced. Yeah. And the vetting hadn't taken place, and this is against again a backdrop of the former cabinet secretary, so the very most senior civil servant, Simon Case, recommending to the Prime Minister that the vetting should be done before an announcement takes place.
Yes.
That never happened.
That never happened either.
So did
all of these people? So Keir Starmer had nothing to do with any of these decisions.
Well, then that is another question, because, you know, people will think, aren't you the man? You are the man running the show. You know,
it's literally your job.
You have been, and you've told before, you've spoken to the country before to say, you know, don't hide behind your officials, you don't blame your staff, you don't say, you know, you carry the can. That's all the accusations that Keir Starmer laid against Boris Johnson, for example. How could Boris not know there were parties going on in number 10 during COVID?
Correct.
How could he not know his own rules? Yeah. Why does he have to rely on his officials? All of this is now coming back to basically bite Keir Starmer, because he's in, albeit different circumstances, everything that Keir Starmer presented himself as being, the former Director of Public Prosecutions, getting rid of the season scandal, we will do things by the book, the process will be followed. It clearly hasn't been, and so that's why we're now seeing a Prime Minister that, by his own admission, says he's come to politics late, which read into that is basically, I'm not very good at politics, but I try and get the big calls right, is what he would try and say. He's now got a cabinet minister, Ed Miliband, that you showed a second ago, giving a candid interview because there's no political direction. There's no political will to save the Prime Minister, I don't think, anymore, because Ed Miliband, I imagine, is now would be a favourite and the front runner, and I believe probably would be the next Prime Minister.
Although we were told yesterday by a lot of Labour kind of insiders that he genuinely doesn't want the job.
I think that
one commentator ruled it out completely. I'm not so sure.
Boris was always, you know, well, if the ball comes loose from the back of the scrum and there's more chance of him being reincarnated as an olive and all of this, no, don't look at me, don't look at... Until, of course, you have to rise to the occasion, be seen to be that man riding in over the hill, or man or woman, and saying, I can save the Labour Party. I don't want to do it, but reluctantly I will stand and I will save the day.
Here's a question, then. Is Starmer now in the clear? Let me throw that to you. 0344 499 1000. You can leave us a voice note there as well, on this and any other connected issue as well. Zoe in Lancashire says, morning Ian, I want Starmer to be vetted. I don't trust him. Fair call. Bill says, Olly Robbins, as far as civil servants go, like it, he came across as boring, but quite a decent bloke. He's been comprehensively shafted by Starmer. Sadly, what does a guy like Olly do now? Never going to be a stand-up comedian. Well, maybe he could, in that kind of quiet, almost Roy Walker-esque sort of way, become a stand-up comedian. Yes, I mean, everybody who has worked with Olly Robbins says that, you know, he's a very decent man. He's incredibly loyal to the system of the state of this country. Perhaps too loyal in the sense that sometimes the system does need changing, or it needs a kick up the backside.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, and I had a few dealings with Olly Robbins, you know, when I was in the Cabinet Office back in the day. But he is someone, by his own admission, he was completely straight-laced there, and he says, look, you know, he has been a career civil servant, so he knows the systems, he knows the processes, he knows the civil service doesn't get it right all of the time because it's a big bureaucratic, big clunky organisation. But his job and his the way about him is that he will try to get things done. Sure. Now, and this is the other big question you've got to ask yourself: what do you want from your civil servants? Do you want them just to listen to political figures in number 10? Okay, ministers decide, advisors advise, ministers decide. You want the civil service to respond to ministers to get the right results or to get what the government programme is asking for. So do you, as a civil servant, say, okay, I'll just say yes to anything that they say, when actually it could be wrong? Or do you want this pushback? Do you want the civil service to actually do its job and challenge things and make sure that the processes are being followed? You don't just want a government coming in to railroad us all into a direction of travel that we don't want to take. It's that balance between, yes, a government of the day deciding what it wants and getting that, but the civil service has a huge job to play to, you know, kicking the tyres, testing those arguments, but making sure that the government of the day is doing it properly.
Indeed. Is Starmer now in the clear? 0344 499 1000. Reference school uniforms. I like this. Comes in from Dave, who says, Ian, I agree with Charlie. Our headmaster looked like Potter from Please Sir, 70s sitcom for the uninitiated, was very strict about uniform. We even had to wear it on the way to school football games on a Saturday morning. That's mean, isn't it?
That is mean, yes. And I wouldn't.
So put your school uniform to walk to the field over there.
Yes, and I wouldn't be at school on a Saturday morning, but
you wouldn't be playing football, Charlie.
I wouldn't be playing. Although no, but I never did a paper round.
I thought you were more of a rugby man.
No, I'm a.
I know you're a big Arsenal fan.
Yes, yeah. Piers Morgan and I like this. And you know, but my weekend job, I used to be a football referee. That was my.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Oh wow.
You know, I was very authoritative.
I don't struggle to believe that somehow. On the other side of Charlie Rowley. Rowley on the pitch. We'll have more from Charlie and from you in a couple of moments' time. Lines are open, 6:25. This is Talk.
Mr. Speaker, I know many members across the House will find these facts to be incredible. To that, I can only say they are right. It beggars belief that throughout the whole timeline of events,
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Lots going on here, 27 minutes after 6 o'clock. Let's get a voice note on Starmer. This comes from... Is it from two people? It comes from two people, Charlie and George.
Morning, Ian. Morning, Charlie. Charlie and George on our way to work again, helping to pay that £40 billion welfare bill. It's just depressing, really, isn't it, with this government gaslighting us and lying to us all the time. Whether they was told about Mandelson's vetting, we know that's a lie. Whether they're an economist or a chess champion, we know that's a lie. Or whether they managed to pay their stamp duty and they forgot all about it, we know that's a lie as well. They're the worst government we've ever had, and I can't wait to see them gone. Have a good day.
But is that Charlie or George?
Well...
I asked you, Charlie, as if you knew.
Yes, yeah. Well, I think they are regulars to...
yes, they are regulars, yes.
So we'll never know. Maybe we'll get George tomorrow, if that was Charlie. But it's a great name anyway. I'm big...
But that might have been George.
Yeah, it might have been George.
I mean, the assumptions you're making here, Charlie, just to confuse things. We've got two Charlies and a George. Talking to Charlies, I don't know if you saw this. Rachel Reeves is under attack for getting us to pay £3,000 for a self-portrait for the Treasury. We can look at that. If you're watching us on our feed, there is the picture. It's Rachel Reeves sitting on a sofa with a big red, obviously, exchequer book, her red box in the background. I don't know what... Is that a good paint? I mean, I couldn't paint it, but, you know, if you see kids' art exhibitions and, you know, year 7, 8, absolutely rubbish, and then you get to year 10, there's always one that someone's knocked out a bit of a tasty picture. You go, oh, he's good. Yeah. There's always one there, isn't there? It's that, and that's what this is. £3,000. British householders already grappling with Labour's tax hikes have paid £3,000 for a portrait of Rachel Reeves. This is a woman that's preparing... and is putting your taxes up and commissions a picture for £3,000.
The optics aren't great, I think, when this story comes out, and again, people will say, well, everybody has portraits here, whether you're former prime ministers or chancellors, and they hang up in either Portcullis House, the attachment to House of Parliament, or, so, she's entitled to it, but it's that sort of sense of, OK, well, we can do this after. We can do this after we've got the crisis through. We can do this as a bit of a way to celebrate any kind of growth that we might get in the economy, or slip the story out then, or commission it for unveil the painting at that moment in time. But, all we know about this Chancellor is that she, was taking freebie tickets to Taylor Swift concerts right at the very start of the tenure.
This was pre the budget.
Pre the budget, yes.
Where we were hammered.
Yes, yeah, and 2 budgets she's delivered, both of which have, taxes have gone up, even when she said she wasn't going to do it. So she hasn't got the best, I think, reputation at the minute as Chancellor, when things aren't going according to plan, where we're just not seeing that growth.
I don't know how this was done. Did they take a photo? I mean, surely just before she was about to go off and deliver the budget, a fella didn't show up and whip out an easel, did he? Before you go, Minister, I've got a palette here.
Yes, just leave the speech in the box, and I'll deliver that later. I'm just posing.
Just want to knock out a quick picture. Lovely ornate red books, which seem to adorn every government office. It's the same in the Houses of Parliament. You walk through the corridors of Parliament, there's loads and loads of books, old books, and you never know quite... Nobody ever reads them. They just sort of sit there. And when I was in the press gallery, I'd walk through and I'd think, should I just pull one of those out and have it? I was always frightened. I thought, if I pull a book out, is it going to go Scooby-Doo on me and the wall's going to kind of turn around and I'm going to end up in another vortex of parliamentary doom somewhere?
Oh, that would be amazing, wouldn't it?
Olly Robbins' office. Yes. Oh, this is where it all happens. All rather strange. We mentioned school uniforms. I do also want to mention another story. We'll come back to school uniforms. There's a lot of comment on whether kids should wear school uniforms or whether they shouldn't. And, of course, the divide in the room is that, firstly, the argument that some make that are against school uniform is actually, oddly, the same argument that people make who are pro-school uniform, is that if everybody's wearing kind of the same thing, there is no judgment on he's got new trainers, he's got that great, top that everybody wants, it's a £200 T-shirt, etc. So you remove that by having uniformity. That's the point. Others are arguing the same point of not having school uniform, that actually it means that you can wear whatever you like. But if you're the kid that really does come from a family that can't buy nice kit for you, then you're going to stand out, aren't you? Because, I mean, let's face it, there's a pecking order in... I have a 12-year-old son. I know about pecking orders. I know what will be worn and what won't be worn. I know what he almost lived in 6 months ago and wouldn't be seen dead in today. So you've got to think about that side of it as well.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, look, what comes with a uniform is the a uniformity of it, but also the formality of it. Whatever the uniform is, you are going to a school where your mind is frankly not developed. The whole point of school is to challenge your mind, to challenge views, to have that free speech, sadly, which seems to be being shut down in a lot of schools at the minute. But it gets you into a routine of, right, I'm putting on my uniform today, I'm going to school, but which you might be doing if you're going to work in later life. What you do later on when you become an adult, so 18, or if you're at sixth form where it's a bit more relaxed, it's a privilege then to sort of say, right, I can be a bit more... where people are a bit more mature, and you don't have that bullying necessarily at sixth form if you are able to use the uniform.
It does kind of change things. And I've got a mate, and we've had like proper rows in the pub over this one. He had some issues with one of his kids, and uniform, he argued, he said, I spent longer in head teachers' offices talking about the hemline of my daughter's skirt than I did her work. And when he put it like that, I thought, that's fair. That sounds like a very persuasive argument. But overarchingly, I think there is something, as you just said, about getting ready for school, being prepared, having a sort of... One here from Mark in Croydon says, casual dress, casual attitude. No wonder young people won't fight for their country. They can't even wear a school uniform, the snowflakes. Good point. This one from Dave. In fact, I did do Dave's one. Collection of cats. Collective noun for cats is apparently, thank you to Anna in Surrey, and also Deborah. It's a colony of cats.
Colony, there you go.
Or a clouder of cats.
Well, now we know.
Or do we?
I'll sleep well tonight.
Someone's driving their car going, no, not the old... You fell for the old colony urban
colony of cats.
It's not a colony, it's a catastrophe of cats. We all know that. Maggie says, so Yvette and Ed criticised Starmer's leadership, and I would ask them, what leadership would that be? It's a fair point. One here from Cliff, who says, morning, gentlemen. Use that word very loosely. I think you make a good point, Ian. Why did Starmer seem so desperate for Mandelson to be appointed? Or perhaps who was pushing Starmer to get Mandelson approval? We know Morgan McSweeney was very much the motivating factor. Keir Starmer is the Prime Minister, however. Morgan Sweeney is no one to anyone, so the Prime Minister should be able to go, Morgan, can I have a quick word? Why do you want this bloke so badly in this position? Cliff also says collective noun for cats is maybe a pride. Big cats would be a pride.
Yes.
It's a pride of lions, not a pride of tigers, though, is it?
Who knows? Is it not?
I know.
We know. Oh, well, there you go. Yes.
Do you know what it is? Titillation.
Titillation of tigers?
Yeah.
Is it really?
No.
No, I didn't think so. I thought that's that sort of leading... Anyway,
we don't know what it is. We are going to probably go down that kind of that route now, aren't we, with this?
But the question is very quickly about why was Starmer appointed? That will be the question that Kemi asked repeatedly today. Why was Mandelson appointed? Yeah. Why did Starmer appoint Mandelson? Because he was never able to answer that question in the first place. Whether you were told the full picture about the vetting, which you thought you should have been, which wasn't the case, but you had enough information in front of you about Peter Mandelson not to make that appointment. Why did you actually then go on appoint him? And frankly, as a former advisor, I think the Prime Minister should have. It's too late now, but should have just said, you know what? Actually, I can understand why people feel the way in which they do about Peter Mandelson. He's had a fruity career. He's had a questionable background because he's been in government in and out more times than people can think. But He was the man, I thought, that had the best way of communicating with Donald Trump, an erratic president in the United States. And he's also someone, to be pretty upfront about it, as a communicator, can deal with the backbenchers. I mean, he might not say that publicly, but that's why I think Starmer appointed him, because he's so desperate. He hasn't got that connection with his backbenchers. He needs a political operator. And Peter Mandelson, he hasn't got the Prince of Darkness nickname for no reason.
For no reason. I think Olly Robbins kind of hinted at that point, that the pool of choice. You know, if you only have career diplomats and you don't have anyone who's got sort of an outside experience, a backstory, maybe slightly colourful in certain ways, then you kind of reduce the potential of talent.
Yeah. Exactly.
Because you remember George Osborne was apparently in the frame. Well, only George Osborne said this, but apparently in the frame for Chancellor, for Ambassador.
You're absolutely right. But that's you're totally. That's the position Olly Robbins put out yesterday, which you would have thought, if the Prime Minister could do politics, he could say, OK, thank you, Sir Olly, that's a good point. I might actually use that as my defence in the House of Commons.
Yes.
But instead, what did he do? He sacked him.
Yes.
Prime Minister sacked Olly Robbins for giving him actually probably quite a helpful get out to say, just go to Parliament and say, look, Peter Mandelson had his faults, but I appointed him on this basis. It turned out to be wrong. I apologise for that. I have apologised for that. But we're going to move on with the new ambassador, and we're going to get on with all the other things that the country needs to be doing. But he can't do that.
And a suggestion that there could be legal action from Olly Robbins after this. You know, was this a straight unfair dismissal case?
Yeah.
For a man who claims he was literally doing the job that you're meant to do under a great deal of pressure. Collective noun for tigers. There's two possibilities. A streak of tigers. Streak. Or an ambush of tigers, apparently.
Well,
that kind of works.
I quite like the streak of tigers.
I might tell you after the break my recurring dream of a tiger attack. I might not. We will decide during this break. 0344 499 1000. Voice note us there as well. You can call on that number. Message 87222. Here's one from Matt. Morning, Matt.
Matt in Warrington with a sore throat and a chest infection, but still loading the van. All this shows is that the shadows of in Downing Street behind both parties, they're the ones that are running the country. All these nasty, foul-mouthed little men and women, they're the ones that are running the country, not the politicians. They did it with Boris, and now they've done it with Stay Calmer. They've got things on everyone. There's no point having a parliament, really, because these people, these civil servants, they're running the country. They need getting rid of, a lot of them. They need some accountability, because we're shambles, it's a joke. Anyway, we'll let them sip. Have a great show, mate.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back. It is the home of common sense. In a nutshell, Charlie, I say reoccurring, I've had this dream twice for some reason. I'm in my bedroom, a tiger has entered the bedroom, and I've gone, where else would you go? Where would you go? Tiger, top of the wardrobe. I thought, I've got it, I've got this thing sorted. Get on the top of the wardrobe. I know the tiger's tall, but it's not the biggest tiger. I'm there on the top of the wardrobe. I'm stuck on the top of the wardrobe. The tiger is like pouring at me. And I thought, got to avoid the claws, got to avoid the jaws. Claws, jaws. I've got this in my head. I'm looking at the teeth. It's coming towards me. It's snarling. It's snapping. It's surely going to get me. Eyes on the teeth, eyes on the paws, eyes on the jaws. I'm watching all of this. In the end, got me with a bloody tail, didn't it? Whacked me one round the back of the neck. And then that, you know, like a dream, you can't remember what happened next. But what is that meant to mean something in reality?
Well, that was an ambush.
And then about a year later, it wasn't like it was like I woke up in sweats or anything. It was just I remembered it. About a year later, I had the same dream again. It wasn't even my bedroom in the dream, by the way. It was just a standard bed, a tall wardrobe, me crouching on the top of it, and this vicious tiger determined to grab a bit of Colin's thigh.
Well,
he's only human.
Yeah,
he's only tiger.
Well, that was an ambush of tiger.
It was an absolute ambush. Yes.
Have you been on a safari?
I haven't been on a safari. No.
There's nothing links you to tigers.
No.
There's nothing, you know, as local zoo or something that you sort of.
And I don't even know how it got in the house because I don't leave a key under the mat or anything.
Left the back door open.
How did it get in there? Christian, our producer, has just suggested maybe too much cheese before bed because
yes.
Isn't that proven that cheese does monkey around with your mind?
I'm not sure.
Dairy.
Is it not only because it's sort of the digestion sort of system, because it's hard to digest later on at night? Well, it's harder to digest, so if you eat it before bed, then that kind of keeps you awake, or it gives you a less of a decent night's sleep, and therefore your mind is still switched on, and therefore you have these kind of creative.
But surely that would depend on the cheese. A soft brie.
Yeah.
You might think it's fairly innocuous compared to some of that, you know, that chunky stuff that looks like it's been mined down the side of a hill. Like you hit it like that, that's what it sounds like. You'd think there'd be a difference in that. I want to bring in this story as well about Brits. A poll shows that half of young people say they would not fight for Britain. What is behind it? Is this a crisis of patriotism? Is it about faith? What's the thinking behind this?
Yeah, and it's a number of things. It's about people not wanting to fight for their country because they feel they're not having the opportunities in the country. So it's about jobs, it's about incomes, it's about social media and society and societal breakdowns, and therefore why would you fight for this country? What is, you know, if you feel not invested, if you don't feel engaged, if you don't feel as though that there are opportunities within your own country, then it's a sort of, well, why would I bother fight to defend a system and a country that just isn't working or doesn't work for me? So it is a sad outcome of this poll.
It's kind of, and obviously loads of things shift. You hear these sort of incredible stories from back in, you know, the beginning of World War I and II, for that matter. You know, kids faking their age because they wanted to fight. They wanted to be on the front line. Imagine seeing your little 15-year-old going off to sit in a trench where your chances of survival, as we now know, were pretty minimal. I'm sure they didn't realise that quite then, but there was a thirst for it, a sense of duty for it. But I guess then the options of that cohort were, you know, nobody was thinking, oh, I'll stay here and monkey around on my iPad. No, you won't, Jimmy. It's 1918. There are no iPads. Yes. You know, the options were different. The value system was different. The perception of state, your relationship with monarchy, everything was different, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely, and you're totally right. I mean, now, you know, we've got people, grown men coming into the country, faking their age as sort of, you know, 15, 16 to get asylum, rather than being upfront about their age. But the mentality is totally different. It would have been, you know, you would have been adored for going into the armed forces, to saying, yes, I want to defend my country, I want to serve. You know, it was an admiral thing. It was a brilliant thing to do. But now we have obviously the cutting in the numbers of our armed forces from used to have about over 100,000 back in about a few years ago.
It's half from when the Cold War was half an hour ago in relative history, and we have half the amount of, this is the army, of in fact, less than half, I think I'm right in saying, of army personnel now.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of that is topped up just by reservists
Yeah.
rather than full-timers, you know, but all doing brilliant active service. But there is a mentality because of whether it's political shifts in, you know, wokery, whether it's about sort of, you know, people are a bit sort of, oh, why do you want to fight somebody? Why do you want to be in a conflict? You know, surely you want to be just, you know, all peace and love.
I mean, I suppose you could look at this the other way around and say half of young people would fight for their country. You can, there's a positive spin on it. My 7-year-old, for some bizarre reason, keeps talking about, you know, I'm going to be in the army, and I'm thinking, oh God, imagine that, him going off to Iran or Iraq or something. And then I thought, well, actually, for a lot of the time in the army, you could be learning a great trade, you could be learning a great skill, you could be seeing the world, you're probably not going to be on front line, hand-to-hand combat anywhere, so there will be potential risks. When you sign on the dotted line, you sign up for the ultimate potential risk. But broadly speaking, you could do 10 years in the army, never ever get into any kind of physical battle, and come out as a great engineer, or come out with some other amazing qualification. You could be, you know, some other skill, practical skill that's going to see you well. You could find your way going up the ranks in the more sort of official side. You know, who knows? We interview these guys all the time, you know, former lieutenant colonel, former major in the British Army, etc. But, you know, those people started out as soldiers.
No, I think, look, you know, the two adverts that just, you know, initially spring to mind is the Army, which I think still says, you know, be the best. And
yes.
the Navy, for me in particular, is the best one because it's, you know, it's I was born in Aberdeen, or I was born in Carlisle, made in the Navy. And it's sort of, that's what makes you. It's by having that skill. But then when you think about it, and what a great career you could have, and what great skills you could get from it, the idea that you could then find yourself as a former veteran homeless in this country and don't get the support from government.
Yeah, there's you should never be have served in the armed forces and ever be homeless.
Totally.
I mean, that just should go with the territory.
Totally, but they are, and we hear about them all the time.
All the time,
you know, that haven't got the support from government, and that is an absolute travesty when you're seeing again. And this is why people are so disengaged, because if you see, for example, the unfairness and the inequality of people that come over illegally in small boats are then handed things like hotel accommodation and given the NHS appointment,
you're guaranteed accommodation if you come over on a rubber boat,
but not if you've
done 4 years in Iraq.
You know, that is a disgrace.
I mean, you can't make that up. When I was a kid, I used to go to I remember sending off for the Navy literature and the bits, and then the Army Career Centre. Do they even exist, those places? There used to be one in Bromley, but I doubt whether that's there, just by the Glades shopping centre. But down, I think it was Tannery Lane in Ashford, there was an Army Careers Office. I used to go in there. I think the fact is, when I was a kid, I loved a brochure.
Yeah.
I loved a brochure. Travel brochure, anything at all. I loved it. You know, I could spend hours with my snout in a catalogue. I was good with that. But I was kind of seduced by the idea of this very early in your, you know, relatively early in your secondary school life. There was this sort of floating career option, whether it was a friend of mine, in fact, my best mate at school, we never kept in touch, which is bad, really. He joined the RAF, and I completely lost touch with him. And I was just watching the TV one day, and they were doing a thing about the Red Arrows, and they said, "Oh, will you please welcome Flight Lieutenant Richie Matthews?" And I thought, that's Richard! It's my schoolmate. He's a flipping Red Arrow pilot. How has he done this? And he was like number 2, I think. You know, there's the guy at the front, and he was the one on the side. I would imagine that is an incredibly glorious career in the challenging and difficult, and Lord knows what else he did. But yeah, I mean, that dream of school, he used to talk about that a bit at school as well, so it kind of made sense. That's where eventually he went. He was a bright guy, and he was very funny as well, and, you know, the first person that ever played me any Monty Python was him on an old vinyl that his older brother had, and we'd sit there in his house after school just killing ourselves laughing. But he took that journey, you know, working class kid, becomes a top pilot in the RAF. Red Arrows must have gone all over the world, which is the reason I mentioned that your career can be colourful in the military in whatever sense.
Totally, and that's you know, what bigger attraction as a kid or as a younger person, you know, looking for a career, looking for those opportunities, when you're so distracted by social media influencers that are always on holiday, having enjoyed, okay, they're not very happy, I don't think, half the time, because they're just posting pictures to project an image, when actually you could be flying an aircraft, doing loop-de-loops or whatever the more technical term is. You
only wanted to do the loop-the-loops.
You could be travelling the world. You could be a musician in the army and play all over the world if you want to be a musician.
That's right. All of those.
In a marching band where you're celebrated, where you're heralded. There are so many opportunities. But you're right. The attitude and the mentality. If you feel any kind of patriotism in this country, it feels like it's under attack.
Yeah, absolutely. Thoughts on that one? 03444 499 1000. Voice notice there as well. The big question, is Starmer now in the clear? Wow, what do you think after his evidence, Olly Robbins' evidence, a debate in the House of Commons? We've still got Prime Minister's questions to come, so there'll be more, I would assume, from Kemi Bates. I'd be curious if nobody brings this up later today, 12:30. You can hear it here live on Talk. And, of course, there's all the evidence from the Met Police. That's referenced the Epstein misconduct in a public office investigation. More on that to come as well. Thoughts on all of those? Let's get a voice note on Keir Starmer. This comes from Brian. Morning, Brian.
Good morning, Ian, and good morning, Alarm Clock Britain. I'm on my way to work to pay tax so that rogue landlord can operate a HMO for illegal immigrants and make themselves incredibly rich. Lovely, eh? Now, Sir Keir Starmer, he's got to go after the local elections, because the only people that are going to vote for Sir Keir Starmer and Labour believe that it's okay to have convicted paedophiles as your best friends. Good luck, everyone. Bye.
I hope I wouldn't have used that. Well, certainly I don't remember trying to get any job for my mates.
Can you get a job? Can you help get a job for ex's mates? But don't tell the Foreign Secretary.
I don't think it's completely surprising that the Prime Minister would be so sensitive about the way in which he was dealing with a member of his senior team, and particularly a Director of Communications who's in minute-by-minute contact with the media, that he would want that kept to a very, very tight group of people at the time.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 5 to 7. Guy in Oxford says, morning chaps, not sure what you were watching, but Miliband was smartened up, haircut and tan, and then threw Starmer under the bus, not his usual way of dealing with any confrontational questioning. That was positioning himself for a move, Lord help us. Yeah, I did rather think that with Miliband, not once, twice, maybe three times yesterday when he was asked that same question. Miliband had that same he might as well have said, I don't know what Starmer was thinking. He might as well have said that, because all his body language said it. His words were, you know, we should never have appointed him. I wouldn't touch him when I was leader. So what does he mean by all of that?
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. I mean, if there was a strong centre in Number 10, if there was a strong political operation, I mean, let's not forget, you know, Starmer still hasn't got a chief of staff replaced. He's lost his director of communications. He lost his director of strategy, Tim Allen. He's gone through 2 cabinet secretaries, so Simon Case and Sir Chris Wormwold. He lost his former chief of staff, Sue Gray, after only about a few months into getting into Number 10. So the operation around the Prime Minister, if you're a cabinet minister thinking, right, God, I've got to go out and defend them again or defend this line, if you don't have that, sometimes you need that pressure, and it's political pressure. It would be advisors like me maybe saying, look, we've really got to get this, you know, get the communications right this morning. You've really got to get this message across. It's really got to land, you know, to shore up the government. Obviously, nobody's done that to Ed Miliband. He's just been allowed to say, yeah, I've got absolutely no idea what's going on across the road. I've no idea why he was appointed in the first place.
Joanna in Salisbury, this is reference Rachel Reeves, some old Victorian name.
Yes, that's a collection of Rachels.
Come here, referral of Rachels. Joanna says, so Rachel Reeves paid 3,000 quid of our money, by the way, to have a portrait of herself in the Treasury before she delivered the budget speech last November. She sat for this portrait. Joanna says 3,000 quid for a portrait. Is her nose really that big? How much time did she waste sitting for that? She had to sit unanimated without moving or doing anything for 3 hours, and no one noticed.
Wow.
They thought that's her usual disposition.
Yes, the most active the chance has ever been.
Yeah, 3,000 quid for that. Sharon says, initially I was sceptical about Olly Robbins, but I tell you something, I have more respect for him than Starmer any day. Probably he should be PM.
Well, I'm not
is that Olly Robbins should be PM? I don't know. I don't think... or did I read that incorrectly? I think Olly Robbins is everything that is great about... the few things that are great about public servants, but did highlight some chinks in the armoury of what is wrong with the civil service as well yesterday, in terms of, you know, protocols and systems, and we have to do this, we do it like this, it's not for me to ask. Apparently, when you fess up to an intelligence, so these are the men in black, literally, that come around and interview people that know you or did know you, a former partner from 20 years ago, the gym you were a member of 25 years ago because it was in a particular place of interest or whatever, clubs you did you collect something that, you know, who did you meet when you met together to discuss your mutual love of collecting rosettes or whatever it was you did. So they talk to these people, then apparently that information remains between you and the intelligence person. It doesn't go anywhere else. And the intelligence person makes advice. The specifics, as it goes through the system, are sort of lost in some respects. But surely, if somebody said to you, is this person reliable? You said, yeah, they are reliable, but every weekend they go to Beijing and play golf with the president. Wouldn't that bit of information be specifically... They wouldn't just say, no, I'm going to give him an amber light for that.
Yeah, it would be, absolutely. But the Foreign Office would then be able to, on the back of a certain amount of information, would be able to then, or should be able to mitigate that by saying, right, when the ambassador or when somebody or whoever it is going to Beijing, we have to have increased security. We need to make sure we've done an absolute sweep of all the rooms. We need to make sure that they're not doing...
Which is the mitigation that he talked about.
Which is the mitigation.
So we can get the advice could be, we border on don't, but it's not a decision.
Exactly.
It's advisory. Exactly. Charlie, we're out of time. We will speak to you very soon. He's back next week with Jezza right here on Talk. Let's get the latest news headlines. The time now is 7 o'clock.
Lied. Any minister, whether it's the most important one, the Prime Minister, or the most junior minister, lying to the House of Commons is a capital offence and would have to go. And if the officials have lied when they're advising you, they should go.
On the 10th of September, the Prime Minister misled Parliament by saying the full due process was followed. If Mandelson failed the security vetting, full due process was not followed. Misleading Parliament is a resigning offence.
The ambassador has repeatedly expressed his deep regret for his association with him. He's right to do so. I have confidence in him, and he's playing an important role in the...
that the process was going...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Edits Talk Breakfast. Yes, good morning. It's Ian Collins in for Jezza right here at the home of common sense. So much to get through here this morning. We sort of began by asking or mulling over the idea, are we moving to the end game on the Peter Mandelson saga? Of course we're not, and neither should we be. The studious and quietly spoken Olly Robbins had his say. Starmer, of course, has had his. We followed procedure. The one thing we do know, and I will forever come back to this headline, is that Downing Street did actually know 7 months ago about the security vetting issue. They knew because a journalist called them. They knew. But apparently nobody told Keir. We also know they put immense pressure on Olly Robbins and his department to get Mandelson through the door. Connecting with this, we also learnt that Number 10 wanted to smooth the path for another Labour staffer to get a big job. His name was Matthew Doyle, who wanted to get him in as an ambassador. Turns out another Labour person who was best mates with a convicted paedophile. What is it about this government that loves to appoint friends of convicted child sex offenders? Goodness me. Elsewhere, a new poll says half of young Brits say they would never fight for Britain. Is this a crisis of patriotism, a loss of faith in the country, or simply a different generation with different values? The war in Iran having another knock-on effect to the cost of living crisis. Apparently, the big disruption is causing a problem for the world's biggest condom maker. They're now warning of problems in the contraception area. But what would that be because of? I mean, literally the condoms? The components that make the condoms? Christian, our producer, just whispered into my ear, latex. I don't know whether he's referring to that story. He just felt the desire to say that. Pants. Who knows what he's going to say next? Pupils should be allowed to wear tracksuits in the classroom to make school uniform more inclusive. I mean, I rather thought that was the whole point of uniform, to make it inclusive, so that you're not judging somebody. There's no fashion show going on. This is according to a group of MPs. A new report has urged the government to permit sportswear and trainers as standard, to remove barriers to activity in the classroom. I'm not really sure it's going to have that effect. Anything you want to talk about on any of these subjects, particularly the question, is Starmer now in the clear? 0344 499 1000. You can leave a voice note there as well. Some breaking news. Inflation has risen. 3.3% in March. It was 3% in February. This is the wrong direction of travel. This will be a complete headache for the government. It's going to be a headache as well for those with a mortgage. It has all sorts of implications. Don't expect rates to come down any soon. 3.3% up from 3% in February. Let's get a word on the big stories. We have Isabel Oakeshott with us, Talks International editor. Morning to you, Isabel. I think it's worth just having a moment and getting your take on the Olly Robbins thing. It was curious. It wanged on a bit, 2.5 hours, I think, for this thing. They do tend to. It wasn't quite Dominic Cummings' territory in the sense, I think he did an 8-hourer, didn't he, at the Health Committee once. Extraordinary scenes. But nonetheless, I mean, what we heard from him is that there was a process that he followed, and Keir Starmer says there was a process, and he didn't tell Keir Starmer about the process. He says he wasn't meant to tell Keir Starmer that bit of the process. That's not how it works. It's never how it's worked. He's in the clear. He's lost a job. Might have a case for unfair dismissal. Who the hell knows? What did you make of him specifically, firstly?
Yeah, I was reflecting on this last night after hours of listening to him and then writing about him for The Telegraph yesterday and talking about him a couple of times on our station. And I think my sort of number one takeaway is, could anyone have listened to all that he had to say and believe that this was his fault, that any of it was his fault? And my answer to that was absolutely not. This is a guy that is steeped in proper protocol, and we can argue about whether or not the protocol is right, and Keir Starmer clearly agreed that the protocol isn't right, but I was left with the impression of someone that was actually incredibly decent. You know, time after time, he refused Emily Thornberry, the chair of the Select Committee's coaxing entreaties to land any of his colleagues in it. You know, she repeatedly pushed him to name names. You know, who was it for? I know what she was after. Yeah. I don't blame her. You know, she was doing a really good job, I think. She has an axe to grind with Starmer because he treated her appallingly.
Yeah, there's no love lost between her and Starmer. That's for sure.
He basically dumped her from the top legal brief. Yeah. So sure, she's got an axe to grind, but I thought she did a magnificent job. But I actually think he did a magnificent job. He patiently, forensically, meticulously explained everything that happened. At no point was I left thinking, that guy's covering something up, you know, there's something that he's just not telling us and someone's bunged him a load of money and he's just being a bit shifty. He just wasn't, was he? He was really straightforward. This is a process. I must say the process tremendously complicated. And, you know, I'm sure you've explained it multiple times already this morning, but it seems to involve this extraordinarily forensic interrogation by intelligence services, of which virtually no one ever knows the content. The words Olly Robbins used were hermetically sealed box. And that's how it is. And there's good reasons for it to be like that. But as we've seen in this case, hermetically sealed boxes can be blown up, and that explosive can cause an awful lot of damage. And where things are at now in terms of that process is people are saying, well, you know, sometimes hermetically sealed boxes need to be very carefully opened in certain circumstances.
Absolutely, and you've hit on exactly the point I was making. I think Olly Robbins showed us the sort of almost the best and the questionable parts of our public life, public service life, in the sense that I think he is exactly the kind of person you want in those roles. He's diligent, he's clearly intelligent, he's will obsess over the details and knows, you know, how the system works, and he's dutiful to his country in doing so and takes it very seriously. But in that information that we got, I think we could see the cracks in the system where you think, well, maybe the system shouldn't be like that. That's not his fault. But yes, I thought he came across incredibly well. I want to play you this clip as well, Isabel, from yesterday. This is as close as he got to criticising Keir Starmer. Let's have a listen.
Regret that this process was not done before announcement. I regret that the due diligence process, which threw up, as I understand it, serious reputational risks, didn't colour the Prime Minister's judgment in making the appointment. There's quite a lot about this situation over the last year and a half I regret. I have no regrets about the work of my brilliant team and the judgment that we came to.
Interesting. So, yes, it rather goes back to that question again. We've raised this morning, Isabel. What was the desperate need to get Peter Mandelson into that job?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I'm left looking at him again with just this impression he is a civil servant. Now, the rest of us are thinking, you know, if it were me I wouldn't be in that job because I'm not nearly careful enough. You know, I'd be a political appointee and I'd be thinking, yeah, okay, there's all these rules, but the bottom line is that there is something really bad in this intelligence that is making our security services very hesitant, if I could put that modestly. Yeah. And you know what? Process be damned. It is my duty to tell my boss, the Prime Minister, that there's a smoking gun here. And I'm just going to, I would feel compelled to say, you know, look, Prime Minister, I know I'm probably not supposed to tell you this, but just to protect everybody, I want you to know that the security services have raised some serious red flags with your appointee. Do you still wish to go ahead under those circumstances? And I do think that there's an argument, you know, should the system allow somebody like Olly Robbins to do just that?
The pressure, and he articulated this early doors in his appearance at the committee, the pressure was absolutely immense. I mean, this was very regular phone calls and a bit of effing and jeffing going on as well to, you know, get this through because they wanted Peter Mandelson. I want to play this clip from Ed Miliband, who was clearly on manoeuvres again yesterday, who kind of dropped all pretense of loyalty. I felt, ordinarily would have sung from a sort of an agreed number 10 script on these things. He sort of rolled over and, in many respects, I suppose, dropped the Prime Minister's judgment right in it. Let's have a listen to Ed Miliband conceding, really, on the insanity of this appointment on GMB yesterday morning.
It was a very risky appointment, and it turns out to be been extremely risky for all the reasons that we now know.
I'm not sure. If I'm watching you, I'm not sure what else anyone needed to tell the person at the top of government about this individual that would have made it clear it wasn't just risky, it was wrong? What else did you need to know at that moment?
Well, look, it's a fair point. I mean, look, it's a fair point, and he shouldn't have been appointed. That is right.
There it was. That comes on the back of that clip we spoke of yesterday, Isabel, when he was appearing with Sophie Ridge. It was exactly the same point, really. You know, it's like, I have no idea. He might as well have just said, I've got no idea what Keir Starmer was thinking.
I mean, I think Labour ministers are absolutely sick to the back teeth of trying to defend this decision. You know, even the Prime Minister himself's not defending the decision anymore. What more is there left to say? The man won't resign. And so these poor cabinet ministers, if we're ever sorry for them, which of course we're not because of all the damage they're doing to our country, these cabinet ministers, misjudged as they all are still having to talk about this damn subject. And all they're thinking is, you know, ye gods, there's an election coming up in a few weeks' time. Yep. My local council's going to be absolutely decimated of Labour councillors. And I'm here on national television still talking about Peter Mandelson. It is a terrible look. It is a total diversion of all their intellectual and political resources, and they're all going to pay the price.
Final question on Starmer then. Is he in the clear?
No, of course he's not in the clear, because in the end, it goes back to what I said at the beginning. Did anyone think it was Olly Robbins' fault? No. So whose fault was it? Starmer's fault. He's admitted it's his fault, and it's not gone away. So no, he's not in the clear. The question is, what are the mechanics for getting him out? And, you know, we've seen a Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, still try to hold on when something like, do you remember, about a dozen ministers resigned to try to get him out? It can be incredibly difficult to get Prime Ministers who don't want to leave the job to leave the job. And it will be fascinating to see whether or not the Labour Party cabinet or machinery can find a way to do this if Starmer is insistent on digging in his heels.
A couple of other stories to look at here, Isabel. We touched on this again in the first hour. Pupils should be allowed to wear tracksuits in the classroom to make school uniform more inclusive. Group of MPs have said it's a way of sportswear trainers as standard to remove the barriers to activity. Now, interesting, it's the same argument that those that are pro-school uniform use, that actually uniform is uniform, and therefore there's no pecking order there. No one is judging you on your trainers or your tracksuit, so everybody more or less looks similar. You can mess around with your tie as much as you like and shorten the skirt as much as you like, but broadly speaking, it's a school uniform. These guys, these MPs are saying, well, actually, no, if you let people wear their own thing, then you actually remove barriers to activity. Kids are more casual and they will be more responsive. I don't really buy into that, but I know there are some people who are very passionate that uniform is a terrible old-fashioned Victorian mechanism to keep kids in their box. What do you say?
It probably won't surprise you that I'm extremely conventional on this, and that there's overwhelming evidence of the good that the uniform does. I'm thinking of a prime example of this is Catherine Birbalsing's amazing school in North London, Michaela, which is in one of the toughest parts of the country. And Catherine Birbalsing runs an incredibly tight ship, often criticised for being far too strict. Her pupils aren't even allowed to talk in the corridors. Discipline is at the core of that school, and she does it because there are so many children there from the toughest and very, very different backgrounds, and they all have to have things that unite them. And one of those is that it's expected that they turn up every day on time, looking fit and ready for learning, and they all wear the same thing, the regulation uniform. And I think it's part of what works. You know, I think otherwise, how low do you go? How about we all just turn up to work in our pajamas? You know, it's a respect thing. It is, and that was the point she made. You know, why even bother? You know, why bother coming to school at all? Maybe we'll just make it online learning because some people have a tough time getting to school. You can't chip away at this stuff until really there's nothing left that binds people together.
I would agree. Although people do go to supermarkets in their pajamas on occasions, which I find.
I mean, that's just unbelievable.
It's deeply upsetting and just weird. Yeah, I don't know what that's all about, and seem to do so without any sense of self-awareness whatsoever. Someone with slippers and a dressing gown, in the bacon aisle. What the hell's going on? It should be said as well, I've got a 12-year-old son, and the idea that, 6 months ago, you know how quick kids grow up, Isabel.
I do.
Stuff that he would wear 6 months ago, he wouldn't be seen dead in today. So if I suggest, why don't you just put those trainers out, which I'm not wearing those, why would I wear those? I'll get laughed at if I wear those. Now, if you transpose that into a school setting, it would be a nightmare every single day.
Absolute nightmare. And how long would they take to get ready in the morning? I mean, I've got 2 young teenage girls. It's a nightmare even with the uniform.
Yes.
The amount of negotiations that have been conducted in this household over skirt lengths. I'd probably be pretty effective negotiating the Straits of Hormuz at this point. Tailors have been involved, skirts have been shortened too much. We've then had to buy new skirts. Can you imagine the hell? If there was a total liberty, particularly for girls, I would say, absolute disastrous idea.
What was that thing at school with the skirt length thing? I mean, I said in the first hour, my mate, who's very much against everything we're saying, he's had his own experiences with school and uniform and everything, and he said, and it wasn't an unreasonable point, so he doesn't like school uniforms at all. He's a little bit, he's a very bright guy. He's got a bit of a hippie side to him, as my mate Dave, and he said he spent more time talking to head teachers about the length of his daughter's skirt than he has about her academic work. He said that can't be right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm afraid to say that I'm in the same boat. Now, I do have sympathy here. I'm in the Middle East, and there's cultural things here. And, although people parade around the streets of Dubai wearing less than you'd see on women on the streets of Liverpool on a Friday night, in school settings, they are incredibly strict about length. And honestly, it's driven me to distraction trying to explain this to my girl. We are in the Middle East. These are the rules. You damn well respect them. But, skirts get rolled up when I'm not looking.
Of course they do. And this as well, the new poll that reveals half of young people would not fight for their country, Isabel. Now, I suppose you could spin that the other way and say half of young people under 30 would still fight for their country. Quite encouraging stuff. Is this down to, is it just changing times, different value systems of new generations? Is it about a lack of patriotism, a loss of faith in our country? Back in the day, I know things were different in the First and Second World War, but, young people actively faked their age to join the armed forces. We're in very different times now.
I think the question I'd ask is this a concern about what is it they're fighting for?
Maybe.
I think we're in such a bad place as a country on so many measures, and we won't bore everyone by going into them all. I feel that young people might say, well, what is it I'm trying to fight to keep? I don't like the look of so much that's happened to my country. Am I fighting to keep things as they are? I think if we can get our country into a wealthier, more prosperous, happier place where people are less bitterly divided, then I think you might find an uptick in the number of young people who want to fight to keep things as they are. At the moment, the fight in young people, if they're politically engaged, is to change our country, not to fight to preserve it.
Indeed. Isabel, great to have you. Oh, by the way, I should just mention, by the way, about the great condom shortage. Apparently, as a result of the war in Iran, the biggest manufacturer of condoms are suggesting that there is a problem here. The fallout has caused the issue. Makers are now warning that prices could rise because of disruption linked to the Strait of Hormuz, avoiding every double entendre landmine. What do you think?
Headlines that you never thought you'd be responding to.
No, ever.
7 o'clock on a whatever we are. Is it only Wednesday? I think that if the issue is latex, as you mentioned it, Ian, there would be many more serious implications, probably to do with hospital products. So I'm just going to leave it at that, I think.
Yes, yeah. I mean, rubber gloves would also be in the same equation, one would assume. Isabel, thank you. Have a great day. Isabel Oakeshott, Talks international editor, with us on the programme. A lot of comment as well about fighting for your country. John in Paul says, you asked would I fight for England? My answer is never in a million years. Fight for what? The question should be, what country in their right mind would want to invade the UK? All they would get is an island full of loony lefties and imports. Great show, mate, says John in Paul. Interesting one from Linda, because I was talking about you could join the army and never see any action. And that is, of course, possible. There was a period of time when a lot of soldiers, and you see this in anecdotes now, they've left the military, spent years, never really, I mean, they did a little bit of peacekeeping, but nothing was really kicking off, although Linda had the opposite experience. As my youngest son joined the army the day before his 19th birthday, 2nd of February. By September, he was in Afghanistan for 10 months, so did see active service quite quickly. It can go kind of one way or the other. And, of course, many people who join the army do want to see some kind of active service, hence the reason for joining. Let's get a voice note on exactly this. Comes from Sean. Morning, Sean.
Morning, Ian. Sean from Grimsby. With all these young people who are refusing to fight, you have to ask why they wouldn't. I joined the army at 17. It was the best thing I ever did. I love my country. Nothing gives me great more pleasure than taking an oath to the Queen. Hundreds of years ago, oaths meant something. But now, what are these people going to be fighting for? They can't get houses. They're going to get taxed to the eyeballs. They'll live with their parents until they're 30s. You know, we've got hundreds of boat people coming in at the same time while they're off fighting. And on top of all this, if you do some fighting, Keir Starmer's mates are probably going to drag you through the courts in years to come and you're going to end up in jail. There's just something fundamentally wrong with everything, all of our systems. If people hate the country that much, they wouldn't fight for it. Great show, mate.
Position taken from the Cabinet Office was that there was no need to vet Mandelson. He was a member of the House of Lords, he was a Privy Councillor. The risks that attending his appointment were well known and had been made clear to the Prime Minister before appointment. Now, in the end, the FCDO insisted and put its foot down. I understand my predecessor had to be very firm in person. But that was a live debate at the point of announcement, and I think it's important to make that clear.
The UK on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Yeah, good morning. Welcome. The home of common sense. So much to get through. Ian Collins in for Jezza for today and Friday. Not tomorrow. I'm actually off tomorrow, so it's somebody filling in for me while I fill in for somebody else. In fact, it's Harry Cole. Harry Cole is going to be broadcasting live from the States, so we'll have the intel on that side on... No, Harry Cole is filling in for me in the afternoons because Mark Dolan is filling in for me as well. but at a different time zone. You're following this, aren't you? Jezza's back on Monday. That's what you need to know. Andrew in Tadley in Hampshire says, the condom price increase, won't Durex do the same as most of the chocolate manufacturers? Instead of increasing the... I already know where this is going. Instead of increasing the price by 30%, just make them 30% smaller, just like they do with Mars bars. Maybe they will do that. Some of us will be fine with that. And this comes in from Neil, who says, I'm a Brit who lived overseas for 30 years. Before departing, I did try to join the Royal Marines, but failed in my application. So it's a case of I would have fought to protect the country that was. Today, living in Switzerland, and despite being an OAP, I would certainly fight to protect my adopted country. That's interesting. Let's get a voice note on this one from Fran. Morning, Fran.
Morning, Ian. Fran from Belfast here. I was in the RAF. I joined the RAF when I was 18, left home, originally from Grimsby, I think you know the place. Moved and joined the RAF, went down to London, travelled all around, Kuwait, Falklands, Scotland, everywhere, Cyprus. Did loads of stuff, absolutely loved it, and it definitely made me who I am today. I was in Kuwait when it kicked off for the second time. It's a bit scary, but we were all together. It was fine. If my kids wanted to join the RAF, I would have no problem whatsoever. It's a brilliant, brilliant career, and I just don't think the kids understand how absolutely fantastic it can be, and the camaraderie and everything. Love the show. Bye.
Fantastic précis of Fran's experience serving in the military. Let's get a word with Simon Diggins, military and defence analyst. Simon, good morning to you.
Ian, good morning to you. How are you?
Good. Lovely to have you with us. It's interesting, when we were first booked to talk with you, this story wasn't around, but obviously, given your own career, it's right we get a word from you. Half of under-30s would not fight for this country. What's going on?
I think two things. The first is a bit of historical perspective. If you asked young people prior to the Second World War, if you remember the famous story of the Oxford debate, there was a number who said that same things are. I think the challenge we've got, though, and this is the serious bit now, is actually making sure that people understand the threat we're under, and also recognise that it's maybe different from before, but that our security, our overall security, and everything that we hold dear relies on the fact that we've got a strong national defence. And I think that conversation hasn't yet started. There was a move over the weekend. Some very senior officers who started talking about starting a national conversation on defence. We have also had some very positive noises, if you like, from the government. But as those positive noises have not been backed up with anything, people are probably saying, actually, they're not really serious about it. I mean, we've got this horrible issue of rhetoric and reality. Until the government actually does what it says it's going to do, and actually says and reinforces the messages apparently it's trying to get across, that we need better national resilience and defence, then I think young people are going to come to the conclusion it's not serious, and I think that's challenging.
Yeah, there is that, isn't there? And I was looking at the numbers. I mean, you know, when you were serving, you were a senior army officer, you know your way around, you know, many of these sort of controversial areas in the Middle East, Afghanistan, Iraq, Ukraine, etc. Half the personnel, this is just the army, are there today compared to the sort of Cold War era. And of course, in relative history, I know it's decades ago, the Cold War, you know, it's recent history in that respect. So what has happened? We've slashed numbers in half. You kind of see those headlines too often, and maybe young people think, this isn't what it used to be.
No, I think they've got a point. When they look at the resources, when they talk to people who actually are serving, and of course that's fewer and fewer people, and all they'll talk about is cuts, they'll talk about bad barrack blocks, they'll talk about equipment that's promised but never quite delivered. I mean, it's not a good picture. You add to it then the sort of challenges we've seen over some of the legal issues, that effectively the lawfare, which the government, through things like legal aid, is effectively conducting against our veterans. And I think people have a view and go, hang on, you know, is this really a good career for me? You know, sounds interesting, but where's the kid? But does the government actually support me? Well, what's happening with our veterans when they appear to have done the job, they're not doing anything illegal, and then 10, 20, 30 years later, are then hauled through the courts? If that's the challenge, you know, if you're serious as a government about your defence, and you bloody well ought to be, then actually you need to be consistent in terms of the messaging you put across, and we have not got that.
Indeed. We need the military, of course, for many obvious reasons, and there is, for those who haven't been reading the news in the last couple of months, a bit of a situation going on over there in Iran. Ceasefire, no ceasefire, it's open, the strait is open, it's all system. No, it's closed again. Oh, look, someone's attacked a ship over there. What's the deal here? Trump has extended the ceasefire with Iran. We know that much. Give us the significance as you see it, Simon.
Well, I think we're in this very difficult business where you've got two sides that are fairly irreconcilable in terms of what they do. There are points of contact, there are points even of conversation about, for example, how long Iran may or may not go forward to develop its weapon systems. And both sides, for their own different reasons, want the straits to be opened. But we're in this kind of negotiation by fire and by force and by rhetoric. And I think that's the challenge we've all got. Trump has extended the ceasefire, but at the same time, that he's just seized an Iranian-flagged ship. So it doesn't quite look like that. And the Iranians have promised a military response. So we would expect them now to attack a tanker or some other ship that's in there, which they can say is associated with Donald Trump and the Israelis. And worth noting that it took 13 years to produce the last agreement with Iran. It's taken even sort of great people like Henry Kissinger could often take months, I think, to unpick the last blockade. So I fear we're in for this running for a while. This kind of tit for tat. Is JD Vance going to Islamabad? No, he's not. Yes, he is. And then something happens on the ground, and then we get sort of, at 4 o'clock in the morning our time, Donald D. Trump sends out a true social message like the one you just put up. How long is it going to last? Is a big question, because obviously the direct effect on our economy. I think we've got, sadly, I think we've got weeks still to run.
Yeah, and in true Trump subtle style, he has threatened to blow up the entirety of Iran again, and its leaders with this new ultimatum. So we know he doesn't mince his words on these things. Do they now believe that he would do that, do you think?
I think they believe and they know that he is capable of severe harm to the regime. But let's look at what that regime now is. It is effectively it's disassociated. It's sort of disaggregated power down to the 31 provinces in there. Insofar there is central control at all, that the lead on that is IRGC, but there are others as well. I mean, when they turned up for their last set of negotiations in Islamabad, some 70 Iranians turned up. So that the impression that was left both to the Pakistanis and to the Americans was the real negotiation was going on inside the Iranian delegation and not really between the Iranian delegation and the Americans. And therein lies the rub. Yeah. Who are the Americans actually talking to? They say, well, we're talking to the Iranians, but which bit of the Iranians are they actually talking to, and who actually has control at a particular moment? And all this really does is just add to the confusion, would be an obvious word to use, but also the difficulties of creating any kind of compromise solution between them.
Yeah. And when we speak again, Simon, which will be very soon, I'm sure, this story will have changed once more. Simon, great to have you on with us, former Army officer of many years, military and defence analyst. Simon Diggins with us on the programme. Young people not joining the armed forces, half of under 30s say, nope, not for me. What has happened? What is the fundamental change? What's the reasoning behind that? Is it just the way young people think now, priorities different, loyalty, patriotism? Is it mainly as simple, and many of you have made it, you look at the country we're in and how it's being run, I wouldn't feel a dying need to fight for this place right now. That might change in a year. It might change over an election, who knows? But right now there is a sense it's unstable, the patriotism isn't there, we haven't got political masters that I feel have my back. I don't sense they really get the Britishness thing. In fact, they're the very antitheses of that in so many respects. It's not an area that this lot in government now, and the last lot to a degree as well, perhaps, it's not in their bones, is it, right? This whole thing, this vibe, this sense, this feel of the patriotism, the loyalty to your nation. They've spent so long monkeying around on the global stage because their whole global agenda is far more important to these people. And they love it. They love the photo. I keep going back to Rishi Sunak, Justin Trudeau, Keir Starmer, Who's the other one you'd throw it? Macron, of course, that kind of sweet, like someone's opened a packet of globalists. And there they are. They all kind of look the same, cut from the same cloth, say the same things. So it's no wonder, really, we're in this place. There's no sense, no centre point of gravity where you go, this is what Britain is about. It's been smashed to bits over the years, and this government, it looks like they're doing the final job on it. So the idea that 18-year-olds are going, no, I'm not going to fight for your country, they're saying, shove it, mate. I wouldn't fight for this place for love nor money, and that's the place we've arrived in. Also, so more calls on that, please. 03444991000. Voice note us there too. School uniform is also on the agenda. A group of MPs have suggested that pupils should be allowed to wear tracksuits in the classroom and not uniform. Anne is in Gwynedd. Anne, good morning to you. Welcome to Talk Breakfast. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you, on a beautiful morning.
Good.
Uniforms. I think it's all about standards. I accept that youngsters, when they first have to wear them, would be a bit embarrassed. But it's also a form of safety. It's recognition. You know that they're school children. Do you remember when... can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Oh, sorry. Tony Blair, can you remember when he said he was too busy to wear a dinner jacket?
Yes.
And from then onwards, standards have gone down, in my opinion. You used to go out for a meal, you'd change. Some people, you'd change.
Going to the theatre, there's another one.
You know, it was an occasion. But I also think if students have to wear a uniform, I think teachers should. Because I remember having to go to the school for one of my children, and I didn't know who the teacher was because she was in jeans and a sweater. I think there should be a standard for school teachers as well. And give them all a sense of pride.
Yes, I like that. I would imagine the sort of sense of pride thing disappeared a little bit from the classroom maybe many decades ago. And, of course, that wouldn't be all teachers, because there'd be teachers listening to this who feel very strongly about this. But there's a general sort of malaise, I think, in that profession. But I think uniform is not everything's perfect about the uniform. Some schools also have weird uniforms, which doesn't help the cause. But generally speaking,
couldn't it?
Generally speaking, there is something. If you had to pick one model, tracksuits or uniforms, I can't see why anybody would say let kids wear casual wear in secondary school. That seems preposterous.
Easy. It's easy. We talk of standards. If parents are going shopping in pyjamas, what have we come to?
What have we come to?
Go to the airport.
Yep.
And people look as though they've just got out of bed, some of them.
What some have. They literally do. They get out of bed, just put my shorts on because, I'm going to Ibiza. It's like, but it's 4 degrees at Stansted, mate. So you might want to stick a coat on as well. And you make a great point. I love the passion as well. Thank you for that. This one from Linda says, morning, I saw a woman in Waitrose the other day wearing slippers, a nightie and a toweling dressing gown. I asked her if she realised she was outdoors. Her response was just getting some bits for tea before picking the kids up from school. I think we're casual enough. We don't need kids down dressing to tracksuits, besides which kids can be picked on for not having expensive brand of trainers. I love that. I mean, as if the nightie wasn't bad enough, she'd had it on all day. What has happened to this great nation? Let's get a call on a voice note even, on Olly Robbins. He's still on the agenda. Is Starmer now in the clear? We're asking that question as well. This comes from Wayne. Morning, Wayne.
Morning, Ian. So I watched the 3 hours of Sir Olly yesterday, and what an utmost professional. How calm, precise, cool and collective. He held a little bit back in the bag, of course he did. But, this guy's like 5 days after losing his career. He's a day after his birthday. His birthday was on the Monday. He's thinking of his family. That's clear from this meeting we had. He gave a little bit, but he's thinking of his family. He wants to get this unfair dismissal and I think slander case done. He was cheaply thrown under the bus by Keir Starmer, and he's an exemplary civil servant, in my opinion. I think once he's got the legal side for him and his family sorted out, I think we'll see a lot more.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, yes. Good morning. Welcome to the home of Common Sense. Ian Collins in for Jezza. There's a lot going on here this morning. We're absolutely rammed to the gills with all sorts of subjects. Joining the armed forces, what was happening in Parliament yesterday, Olly Robbins giving evidence. What have we found out about how the civil service or the vetting process works? Big old list of areas up for discussion. Let's get a word from Sir Richard Dearlove, former head of MI6, knows his way around the apparatus of intelligence. Richard, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Ian.
Nice to have you with us. I mean, it was interesting, perhaps to you, when Olly Robbins was giving evidence, you'd have, recognised a lot of the structure of what he was discussing. To many of us, we looked at this and sort of there was a bit of wonderment, I suppose, around the idea of who gets to know what and when. The idea that the permanent secretary at the Foreign Office doesn't necessarily get the specifics of why somebody might have been flagged as concern. They just get the concern. And then that gets passed down the line and no one gets the full picture. Is that more or less how it happens?
Well, you don't divulge all the detail of the content of a developed vetting inquiry because it's confidential. You can divulge the result. And that's clearly the distinction that has to be made. I mean, Olly Robbins, I think, was put in a very difficult position. But on the other hand, I think it's wrong to try to compromise over issues of national security once the doubt had been expressed about Mandelson, which was, I think, pretty clear-cut. I think he perhaps should have not, as it were, tried to mitigate that and find a way through the problem. He just should have said, look, he's failed his DV, he can't take up the appointment. Okay, that would have caused a crisis with number 10, but maybe that would have been a better outcome for everybody.
Yeah. Is this, obviously, if an intelligence officer is interviewing people and building a profile on a case they've been asked to look at, obviously it would completely obliterate the system if all of that just became, everybody in the office knew it, they knew about it. The reason we employ good people in these roles and people that you would have worked with, your team, and the diligence of those, it is predicated really on that code of conduct. So we sort of understand that bit. But you might think when it's a particular job, such as an ambassadorial role, where concerns are flagged and there's all sorts of rumours, was it links of China, links... I mean, if, for example, it was discovered that Peter Mandelson played golf with the president of China every other weekend and has done for 6 years, you might think that surely that specific detail would be imparted and the Prime Minister would get to hear about it. Or are you saying that even that wouldn't be flagged?
Well, let's say they'll try and avoid divulging the material that leads to the judgment about the guy's suitability. But look, in the case of Peter Mandelson, a lot of this stuff was, I think, pretty publicly known.
True.
And the problem, I think, is that the appointment of Mandelson was announced without conditions before the DV was carried out. I mean, number 10, if it had been wise, might have said, we're going to appoint him ambassador subject to the outcome of, the investigations that should be carried out in relation to this post. So actually, I mean, if you go back to the start, just the choice of Mandelson was appalling. I mean, I was listening to the inquiry yesterday or in the committee, and then Commons questions later on when it was the debate. And there were people asking about his directorship of this Russian company, Starmer. Well, look, that sort of connection after the invasion of Ukraine is pretty lethal when it comes to giving somebody a DV status. And I gather there were other issues with Chinese companies which his consultancy had been working with. And I mean, all of these are really red flags when it comes to national security. And I don't think you can muck around with that at all. people shouldn't be given the benefit of the doubt. And, you know, but Olly Robbins was put under huge pressure, we now see, by Number 10.
Yeah.
Some of the quotes that you have one or two on your website there, you know, it's outrageous what happened.
It is incredible. I think the work experience could have worked out that maybe Peter Mandelson shouldn't get the job. I mean, this was in as you rightly say, I mean, it wasn't a secret that he was a director of a company that had dealings with nations that perhaps aren't our best friends. You know, we know that that there were other areas of his life that certainly would have thrown up a large range of question marks. It wasn't hard, and it does, as you allude to, Richard, it does beg the question, what was the dire urgency to get this man into the job? And of course, it's a political appointment, isn't it? There's lots of professional diplomats that have never are not political in that sense. Do you think non-political diplomats make better diplomats than political appointments? Because it's happened before. David Cameron famously had, you know, his man then went on to the diplomatic service. I think Olly Robbins did allude to this, that sometimes you do need to widen the gene pool, and people with vast experience in all sorts of areas can actually be a good thing.
Yeah, I think that's, you know, there are occasions when political appointees as ambassadors do a good job, and they have the benefit, let's say, of a personal relationship back to Number 10 with the Prime Minister. And, you know, they can exercise that political sort of inside knowledge, which can be helpful. But I mean, in the United Kingdom's system, I mean, we haven't traditionally had lots of political appointees. The US does it differently, and pretty much every senior American ambassador under any administration is a political appointee. I think the problem that Olly Robbins had, and he described it very well, was that they were in the process of, let's say, cutting the Foreign Office for reasons of economy and closing down a number of senior jobs. And to appoint a political appointee when other senior diplomats in the Foreign Office were not going to get jobs after full-time careers would have been very, very difficult from the personnel point of view. So, I mean, I think he was put in an incredibly difficult position.
Yeah. And,
you know, if Mandelson had had a different profile, right, he could have made maybe a very good ambassador. But look, the guy had a well-known integrity problem, which goes right back through his career.
Yep.
And, you know, I said at the time that he was appointed, this is completely unsatisfactory and it will cause a problem.
I wonder, though, Richard, whether it was, had the president not been Donald Trump, then maybe it wouldn't have gone through. Do you think there was a bit of a sort of, like, you know, he's a bit of a renegade, so is Trump. You know, they've got they're colourful characters, put it politely.
Well, I think
there's a synergy there that will work.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, someone in the Labour Party had a great idea. This would be a good wheeze. You know, we want a Trump whisperer, someone who can handle Trump. And, you know, they've turned to New Labour talisman Mandelson, who had you know, I'm not disputing the guy's ability, but there are other aspects to this appointment which are so important from national security point of view that it was always going to be a car crash.
Yeah, it was I mean, without sounding like a know-it-all, but, you know, I think you're echoing the same point. I mean, it was always going to end like this in some shape or form. It was just a case of when. Sir Richard, lovely to have you on. Great to see you. Thank you for your time. He is Sir Richard Dearlove, former head of MI6, right at the top of that game. Thank you to him. 0344 499 1000. George in Leicester says, am I the only one who heard a different conversation yesterday from Olly Robbins? He wouldn't give up any names. What a load of old BS. Name and shame, zero accountability. It's disgusting. Yes, I think he rather thought it's not really his duty, his job in that respect. He wasn't there for that reason. Emily Thornberry wanted the names, much in the same way as a journalist wants the names. He wasn't going to be dragged into that aspect of this. I think that was largely his position, but I hear what George is saying. Let's get a voice note on fighting for your country. This comes from Darren. Morning to you, Darren.
Morning, Ian. Darren from Warsaw, ex-forces, rejoining the army. You can get a great trade. You can get to see the world. You can get some of the best mates you'll ever have. I'm still in touch with lads I served with 40 years ago. You can get self-respect. you can get a good standing in life, you can appreciate things that you do have, especially when you've been in a war zone. Oh, but most important, mate, you can get prosecuted, and our Prime Minister will see to that. Great show, mate.
The handover briefing I was getting as I arrived at post was what I felt was a generally dismissive attitude to his vetting clearance. The focus was on getting Mandelson out to Washington quickly. Despite this atmosphere, an atmosphere of pressure, the department completed developed vetting to the normal high standard. Because the vetting process is not there to determine fitness for office or reputational risk, it's there to protect national security.
UK on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Yeah, welcome back. Lots to get through, and also time as well to get in this story, which is extraordinary. This is about kids or people that are born after 2008 will not be able to buy cigarettes whatever, for the rest of their lives. Let's get a quick word on this. Alan Miller, founder of the Together Declaration, is with us. Alan, morning to you. I mean, this is curious. I can't quite work out how this is going to work, but they're hell-bent on bringing it through. Apparently, some other countries have done it. So if you're born after 2008, for the rest of your life, you will never be allowed to buy tobacco products. How does that even function?
Well, good morning, Ian. It functions, of course, with digital ID, and biometric verification. That is the push for everything. Interestingly, if we see, I mean, there's a lot of things that could be said about actually merging as well, stopping smoking with a ban on vapes, which PHE and lots of the reports have shown that, you know, they actually encouraged people to stop smoking to get onto vapes. Now there's an all-out ban. It's much more to do with prejudice than anything to do with epidemiology or health. But across the board, even the idea that you ban what people might call vices or some people might call sins, that the state knows best, with large claims of what that does to the bottom line and the balance sheet. And the idea that the state that can't deal with all sorts of things like economic growth, protecting borders, education, then has this really great idea, and it's all to do with stopping people doing some of the things that people might have called pleasure in the past. But even if you put that to one side for a second, because those are very important things still in a society that values liberty, this is all part of a push, along with facial recognition and the fact now that's going to be rolled out everywhere without any manifesto or any debate, that digital verification, digital ID will be utilised. It's already been presented as part of the overall package. And increasingly, we see that the case. We've seen that in Australia. Let's take an example of some of the unintended consequences. In Australia, where a packet of cigarettes now is £25 or more, where the huge increase in illicit trade has gone on, there's been bans, but with prohibition, we know that what that does is it creates a black market. And we've seen gang wars, and we've seen firebombing, and we've seen a huge illicit trade with even more damaging products, carcinogenic and very problematic. So it's not that it actually resolves the problem either. Prohibition doesn't do that. You know, obviously there's got to be, you know, people can have discussions about health, about choice, about pleasure. But the idea that the state just gets involved and then bans it in various places as well, outside different areas and in public, is all part of the problem. And you know what, Ian? This is why we've got our rally on Saturday in the Four Nations, the Scrap Digital ID rally, because utilising and harnessing and weaponising everything to try and force everyone into digital ID, like with a social media ban in Australia, just like the same with the cigarette bans, we've got a situation where increasingly the state is kind of controlling and surveying and limiting us. And we're saying that everyone should come out on the street, whether you're in Northern Ireland, Wales, Scotland or England. We'll be at Trafalgar Square at 2 o'clock on Saturday. Scrap digital ID. That goes to the heart of this issue and many others.
Because the issue, I suppose, in a kind of summary here, Alan, is that, you know, fast forward years, a 50-year-old person goes into a tobacconist and says, can I get 20 Marlboro Lights? And I was trying to work out, well, how would they know that you were born after 2008? Well, they will, because the minute you walk in there, the camera will have already flagged you. It would have come up on the till. If it didn't come up at that point, when you tried to pay for it, it will say this. So a 50-year-old couldn't buy cigarettes because they were born in the wrong year, and the technological digital mechanisms will be in place to ensure that happens.
That's absolutely the case. And, you know, that's going to happen much sooner if this all gets allowed to happen than later. And the idea that we can make choices, and, you know, they start with smoking and then vaping, which they were promoting as being a good alternative. And 5% of the population vapes now, you know, out of a 10% smoking population. The majority of them, the lion's share, about 80% of them were former smokers, and it's much less damaging. And so you've got a situation, it starts with smoking, but then is it about your fuel consumption, or about where you go on holiday, about what things you recycle, or where you're driving, or you're not even allowed to drive anymore? All of this, as well as what you say on social media, your banking, your finance systems, we've seen that with debanking come under some pressure. Across the board, the DWP intervening in bank accounts. Across the board, we have a situation where a snooping, surveying state. And that's why we're very much encouraging everyone to have their voices heard, to say, let's stop this, make sure we scrap digital ID and get to the drawing board about how we actually, what the role of the state should be in terms of helping economic growth and development, and not nannying us consistently.
Saturday, Trafalgar Square, Saturday afternoon. You can meet Alan there as well. Thank you. Always good to see you, Alan. Thank you, Alan Miller, founder of the Together Declaration. That's an extraordinary manoeuvre. Again, this is about state overreach as much as anything else. Digital ID, thoughts on that as well. 0344 499 1000. It is just a shade after 8 o'clock. Let's get the latest news headlines.
If the Prime Minister's knowingly lied, any minister, whether it's the most important one, the Prime Minister, or the most junior minister, lying to the House of Commons is a capital offence and would have to go. And if the officials have lied when they're advising you, they should go.
On the 10th of September, the Prime Minister misled Parliament by saying the full due process was followed. If Mandelson failed the security vetting, full due process was not followed. Misleading Parliament is a resigning offence.
The Ambassador has repeatedly expressed his deep regret for his association with him. He's right to do so. I have confidence in him, and he's playing an important role in the UK-US relationship.
It was clear that the Prime Minister wanted to make this appointment himself, and had therefore I understand that the FCDO was informed of his decision and acted upon it, and via the Foreign Secretary sought and obtained the King's approval for the appointment.
Even the expectation that Olly Robbins felt quite comfortable, this is what we're being asked to believe.
Yes.
To hold back this information that he knew that he had that Mandelson had failed the vetting process, and that at no stage that it was necessary to tell the Prime Minister.
It's unbelievable. So he either knew and lied on this issue, or he didn't know, and that's just as bad.
Can the Prime Minister tell us, did the official security vetting he received mention Mandelson's ongoing relationship with the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein?
So clear.
We're going to be sped up.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good morning, welcome back. Home of Common Sense. It's Ian Collins in for Jezza. 8:05. So much going on here this morning. Some great comments coming from you on a whole range of issues. Jay's in Brighton. He says, if Starmer was to go this week, Jezza will be furious that he wasn't on air at the time. That always happens. What happened to Julia, didn't it? Was it last Friday when the when the Olly Robbins firing happened? I mean, so much has gone on. Good point. Jezza is back on Monday. Nigel says, morning Ian, great show. I think all school kids should be forced to dress in the same tracksuits as issued to illegal migrants. That's got to help society and give them the right stuff. Yes, if it's about uniformity, and uniformity as in there's no judgment on kids, he's got better trainers than she's got a better tracksuit top. Oh, that hoodie costs 200 quid. That one's from Primark, whatever. You know, all of that would happen with having an anything goes thing in school. Maybe the way to do that is to have, I suppose if you all had the same tracksuit, you're back to wearing a uniform. And Max says, I've seen the picture of Rachel from accounts. What a waste of money. Should have got a painting by numbers kid. Stop wasting our money. This is the Treasury that have forked out on a £3,000 painting of the Chancellor. There it is. You can see it on your screen. That was apparently painted on the day of the last November Doom budget. I don't know how she had the time to sit there for that. No wonder the budget was a few minutes late. She was having a picture painted. Big story of the day, of course, is that of Keir Starmer. Is Keir Starmer now in the clear? Let's speak with Dan Hodges, commentator with the Mail on Sunday, regular with us here on the programme. Morning to you, Dan. I mean, there's been lots of angles and twists and turns in this, and it sort of culminated a bit yesterday. Olly Robbins giving that evidence, a very studious, quietly spoken man. I thought he did exactly what he should be doing, and some wanted him to go further. Thornbury wanted names. He wasn't going down that particular route. What did we learn from it yesterday, and does it leave Keir Starmer in the clear?
Well, no, it certainly doesn't leave Keir Starmer in the clear. What we learnt, there were a number of quite incredible revelations in Robbins' evidence. For me, the most damning, and I think this is what we will see Kemi Badenoch focusing on today. Obviously, for the past week, we had been told about Keir Starmer's frothing, seething fury at not being told that Peter Mandelson had failed his developed vetting.
Yeah.
And Starmer said publicly, he said in the House of Commons, that had he known Peter Mandelson had failed his developed vetting, that this was of such major significance that he would not have appointed him in the first place, and he would have cancelled his appointment. What we learned from Robbins yesterday was that far from placing such importance on the developed vetting process, Downing Street was not only attempting to pressure officials to simply clear Peter Mandelson regardless what the developed vetting process found, they didn't actually want a developed vetting process at all. It was confirmed yesterday by Downing Street after Robbins' evidence that there were discussions between the Cabinet Office and Downing Street and the Foreign Office about whether Peter Mandelson could simply be packed off to Washington without having a vetting process because he was a peer of the realm and had previously been a Privy Councillor. Now, the fact that he'd been sacked twice over allegations of lying as a minister, they didn't seem to take into account. So, as I've said right from the beginning of this process ad nauseum, Keir Starmer stood up in the House of Commons last September and said, in relation to Peter Mandelson's appointment, all due process had been followed as it was with all ambassadors. And that statement to the House of Commons was a lie. And at the time Keir Starmer delivered it, he knew it was a lie.
When you say all procedures were followed, so which bit wasn't followed that has resulted in Keir Starmer being accused of lying?
The bit that wasn't followed. I mean, there were so many aspects of it, but the bit that wasn't followed that we found out from Robbins yesterday is, and as he made clear, due process. You know, in relation to development vetting, development vetting is supposed to be an independent process. It's supposed to be a process which is conducted by security professionals to judge whether or not the person in question can be given access to our most sensitive secrets. And in relation to Peter Mandelson, they were the most sensitive secrets of all. As Washington ambassador, not just our secrets here in the UK, but secrets shared with us by our intelligence partners in the United States. And what we now know is from Robbins' evidence is Downing Street and the Cabinet Office attempted to interfere in that process so that, as I said, developed vetting didn't happen at all. But when the Foreign Office pushed back and said, look, we've got to have a vetting process, Downing Street, as that was going on, continued to pressure the Foreign Office on a daily basis to try and get Peter Mandelson appointed, regardless of what the developed vetting process said. The other crucial thing is, obviously, and this is something that the Prime Minister was aware of, at the very start of the appointment of Peter Mandelson, Simon Case, the then Permanent Secretary, wrote Keir Starmer a letter which specifically said, do not appoint this man. You know, the process that you should now follow, Prime Minister, is give me the name of your appointment, and then we will set in place a process to ensure the appropriate due diligence and the appropriate security clearances can be in place at the point that you appoint him. Keir Starmer completely ignored that, completely rode roughshod over that, and decided to announce Mandelson's appointment.
And he can't sort of say, oh, well, it wasn't me, it was... Oh, he does say this. We know I wasn't told. To me, Dan, as well, this comes back, for all of this, it ultimately comes back to the fact that, and you raised this when we last spoke, that the journalist David Maddox put in a question to Downing Street, head of communications at the time, saying, I'm hearing that Mandelson has not reached the bar for security clearance. Last September, this was the day of Mandelson losing the job, I believe. That, to me, is it. That means Downing Street knew, right? Downing Street knew, the Cabinet Office knew.
Well, exactly. I mean, certainly the Cabinet Office knew when David did that. I mean, the one thing I would say is, one area where Olly Robbins' evidence did kind of change perspectives, actually, is Olly Robbins... and you have to decide whether or not you believe what Olly Robbins said, and I did. I thought he came across as very credible, much more credible than any other of the people involved in this saga. What he actually said was, in fact, this is the great irony of this whole thing, that technically Peter Mandelson did not fail developed vetting, that concerns were raised by the people conducting the vetting, red flags were raised. He said they were leaning towards saying Peter Mandelson should not secure clearance. But then when Olly Robbins looked at it, firstly because of the pressure he was being put under and the implications of a refusal, but also he believed mitigations could be put in place. Now, actually, that aligns very closely with what myself and my colleague Glenn Owen wrote about this last September. We were told that red flags had been raised in relation to Mandelson's vetting, but it was deemed inconvenient from the perspective of Downing Street for Mandelson's appointment to be blocked. So, if you like, the concerns were massaged and watered down. Now, based on the evidence that we got from Olly Robbins yesterday, that seems to be what happened. But the reason why it happened, and he was very clear about that, one of the factors that he took into account was because Mandelson's appointment had already been made and announced, if he decided to block Mandelson, That would be very damaging for the Prime Minister. It would be damaging for relations with the United States. It'd be very damaging for the confidence in terms of the intelligence sharing that was taking place. And it would be damaging for the country as a whole. Yeah. But the reason why he formed that judgment, and he was crystal clear, is in part because of the pressure he and his officials were being placed under by Downing Street. Yeah. Now, as I said, that is a clear abuse of the process.
Of course it
is. The
developed
vetting process is supposed to be conducted entirely independently from political interference.
So Starmer did mislead the House then by saying due process.
He lied categorically to the House. There is no ambiguity about this now. As I said, he told the House due process had been followed. We now know, we have it, there is documentary evidence that time and again, from Simon Case onwards, Simon Case set out to Keir Starmer very clearly. This is the due process. You should ensure that the appropriate security clearances are put in place before Mandelson was announced. Olly Robbins confirmed that was his opinion and advice. Olly Robbins' predecessor as Perm Secretary of the Foreign Office had also given similar advice to Keir Starmer. And then, this is another whole aspect of this, mysteriously, it was suddenly announced he was leaving his post 8 months before he was due to retire. At every stage, we now know, due process was corrupted and abused and short-circuited because Downing Street took the decision Peter Mandelson had to be rushed into Washington as quickly as possible without any regard at all for the implications
for due process. But I guess Starmer, if he was in the witness box right now, Dan, would say, well, I'm referring to the process of his deep vetting. That process was followed, and it then went to the Permanent Secretary, Olly Robbins, and he made a judgment based on that, it was followed.
But again, we have to be clear, due process wasn't followed in relation to the direct vetting, because due process required the DV assessment to be conducted by security officials without any political interference or political pressure. You know, Robbins was very clear about that.
Yeah, and he was
very clear about that yesterday. And that is commonly accepted. It's commonly accepted. The debate we've been having over the last few days was, should Keir Starmer have been informed at the point that Mandelson failed vetting? Now, as Robin said yesterday, technically, I mean, he was dancing on the head of a pin, but if his evidence is correct, he successfully managed to stay on the head of that pin. Technically, Mandelson did not fail vetting. So Olly Robbins was not obliged to tell Keir Starmer that. But that's a separate issue.
Yeah.
The key thing in relation to due process is it needs to be conducted by security officials without any direct or indirect pressure from politicians. And as Olly Robbins made clear in his evidence yesterday, that direct and indirect pressure was applied by Downing Street. And so when Keir Starmer said to the House of Commons, due process was followed, that was a categorical lie, and we have the proof for that now.
So is he likely to resign then, do you think, Dan?
He will resign. He's obviously not going to, he's not going to stand up in the House of Commons at 12 o'clock in tears and say, I'm really sorry, I made a terrible mistake. I'm going to fall on my sword. But being in the House of Commons yesterday afternoon, it was quite clear that the mood amongst Labour MPs has shifted. And you can see that. I mean, that's reported a lot in the papers this morning.
Well, we saw Ed Miliband yesterday doing the rounds.
I was literally going to say, there was actually a really interesting moment where Ed Miliband, you could almost see it. I mean, as other people pointed out, I think when he was on with Susanna, and you could just literally see it. He started to go through the process of trotting out the Downing Street lines. And you could see halfway through, he just went, what's the point?
Yeah,
no,
it was a rare moment of brilliance from Ed Miliband where he just thought, no, I'm rolling over on this, but I can't defend this.
I can't do it.
It was a great point. Listen, Dan, always good to see you. Thank you, Dan Hodges, from the Mail on Sunday, regular with us here on Talk Breakfast, of course. 0344 499 1000. Let's get a word from Katie Lamb, Conservative MP for the Weald of Kent. Katie Lamb, good morning to you.
Good morning.
You haven't even got a coat on. I'm going to guess you are cold.
It's a little chilly, but it's a bright spring day. It's a beautiful day to be outside Parliament.
It is a spring day. The sun is out, but it betrays a bit of a chill, as you rightly say. Never a dull day over there at Westminster, and of course it's been ramped up. Yesterday, Olly Robbins in the afternoon, Kemi Badenoch and others, of course, in that debate, I think 3 hours long. PMQs coming up today. What are the questions that remain then for the Prime Minister?
There are many questions that remain for the Prime Minister. I think perhaps first amongst them immediately is, when are you going to publish all of the information that we have asked you to publish with all of the files that were and by implication weren't considered when appointing Peter Mandelson to be the Ambassador of the United States? I think there is a question about how on earth he can claim that what Olly Robbins did was completely unacceptable and summarily dismiss him, and yet also say that he followed process and procedure and everything that he did was fine and good. There are a very large number of outstanding questions for the Prime Minister. There are some more specific ones about what he knew about Mandelson's ties to Russia, about Mandelson's ties to China. We have, I'm afraid, many outstanding questions, and I'm looking forward to seeing Kemi ask some of them today.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, it looks as if Olly Robbins has got the most high-profile case for unfair dismissal that's ever been seen in employment law. But we'll watch that one with interest and see how it pans out. On the specific issues of Mandelson, the question we keep coming back to, Katie, this morning here on Talk Breakfast is really simple. What was this dire need to get Mandelson into that job? Why so desperate? The work experience could have worked out that perhaps this wasn't the right man for the job. I mean, we know about the Epstein stuff. That was on public record. Years ago, he was staying at the man's flat while he was Deputy Prime Minister and Epstein was in jail. So there's that. But also, you know, we've known about Mandelson's business life, a lobbyist. We know who he breaks bread with, whether it's the Russians or the Chinese. That's a matter of public record. If anybody was not suitable for that job, it was Peter Mandelson.
It has been from the very beginning risible, the idea that the Prime Minister didn't know that this was an unsuitable appointment. I think the first time Peter Mandelson was sacked from the Cabinet, I was 7 years old. Could have called my mum and she would have told him that this was a terrible idea. You know, the idea that this was something that the Prime Minister didn't know, information that he didn't have. You know, there are lots of conversations to be had about what he did know, about the information that he did have, but he could have Googled him. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, well, right. I mean, it's a Google search away. And that's just that issue. I mean, there's so many tentacles to this man's colourful life. And look, I know you don't always need sort of boring, dull career politicians in jobs. It's nice that people have had an experience outside of the world. That's all great. But Mandelson, you know, I keep saying this, his nickname was the Prince of Darkness, for goodness sake. I mean, the clue was there, right?
Peter Mandelson, for a generation, has been the most notorious dodgy man in British politics. The idea that he was an appropriate appointment to our most important, most sensitive ambassadorial role is a joke. It is a colossal failure of judgment from the Prime Minister. And all of this wrangling about process and the technicalities of what is and isn't a lie. I mean, there are multiple things that he said at multiple points that are obviously not true. So he's not willing to say that he lied. He's not willing to say that he unintentionally misled the House, that he said things in Parliament that weren't true, even though we know that that's the case. The whole thing is completely untenable. It's not credible.
So the Conservatives are going to keep the pressure on. I mean, we haven't even had that tranche of information from the Met Police. This is reference misconduct in a public office. That's largely a separate point to all of this. So this isn't going away anytime soon. The Conservatives' intention then to keep up the pressure on this? Are you looking for the Prime Minister to resign? And if so, do you think he might do it during PMQs?
We absolutely are. He is not fit to hold the office that he's very lucky and privileged to hold. There's no way that somebody that has treated a matter of national security in the way that he has should continue to be the Prime Minister. I don't think, unfortunately, that he has the integrity and the honour, certainly, to do it today. But that is absolutely what we're calling for, because what he's done is unacceptable and inexcusable, and the British people deserve better. There are lots of areas in which the Conservatives and Kemi Badenoch will continue to press. Most immediately, we had something called a humble address a couple of months ago, where we asked them to release all of these papers, to release all of these files. They still haven't done that. They are delaying it, in my opinion, until after the local elections. So that will be the next round of work to do, to go through those papers when they are finally released. But there is a lot to do and a lot still to uncover.
Indeed. PMQ's at 12:30. Kemi Badenoch has done, it seems, I mean, you would say this, wouldn't you? I'm even guessing what your answer's going to be. She's done a pretty good job on this. The Tories, are the Tories back in business, do you think? There's been a sort of a spring in the step of the front bench in the last 6 weeks.
Well, I certainly like to think so, but I really believe so, and that's also what people tell me when I am out on the doorsteps, when I'm out speaking to constituents. People say to me, it's been amazing to watch Kemi completely dismantle and destroy the Prime Minister on this issue. She's been forensic, she's been thorough, and crucially, she's been right. The Prime Minister is completely in the wrong, and everything that Kemi has done has exposed that.
And in terms of where the story goes next for Keir Starmer, of course, he's not going to resign at Prime Minister's questions. He's likely to have a bit of a bruising May elections, but then, you know, the Conservatives might also have a bit of a stinker in that respect. He's likely to go, though, isn't he, at some point, maybe not because of the Mandelson, that collectively all the mood music around him, the U-turns, the ambassadorial debacle, and then potentially a stinking set of results come May the 7th. The smart money says if I went to the bookmakers, I'd get good odds on the fact that Starmer's going to be gone a month after the May elections. What's the intel on the streets and the corridors of Westminster telling you, Katie? Because I know Labour MPs do talk to Conservative MPs. What are they telling you?
Well, he's got no grip on his party. He's got no grip on his cabinet. You were talking about Ed Miliband earlier. You can see that also in what somebody like Pat McFadden, the leader of his Praetorian Guard, has been saying this morning. Even they aren't willing to defend the Prime Minister. But the way that the Labour Party is set up, it is very difficult for them to get rid of a leader. I think they haven't done it since the Second World War. And so whether they have the courage to do what needs to be done and accept that this man is no longer fit to run the country remains to be seen.
Katie Lamb, thank you for your time. Conservative MP for the Weald of Kent, thank you to her. The Tories are going to keep up the pressure. Can they gain from this, though? I mean, it shouldn't be. This is a matter of national importance, of security, of credibility of our country, our international kind of image and stuff. It's not just about the vanity of one party, but if anyone needs the house points right now, it's got to be the Tories. They're still fighting their way back from that absolute pounding at the last election. Will it work? PMQs this afternoon, 12:30. Hear all of it, all the commentary with Julia on the programme a little later. Also responses to inflation, that has risen to 3.3%, up from 3% in February. That's a terrible look for the Chancellor. And half the country of young people will not fight for this nation if there was a war or if they were asked to simply join the military. They've got no interest in it at all. On that point, let's get a voice note. This comes from Jez. Morning, Jez.
Morning, Ian. Jez here from Deal in Kent. 23 years served Royal Marines officer, British Army soldier. This business about youngsters saying they won't fight for their country. Yeah, it's just youngsters being youngsters, you know, and wanting to be controversial and wanting to be contrary and not wanting to conform or to be seen to support the establishment. But the reality is, if this country was facing an existential threat to its very survival, as it did in 1939, 1940, they would fight for this country. They wouldn't have any choice for two reasons. One, they'd be conscripted, and secondly, they'd have to fight for themselves, for their friends and for their families' very survival. Otherwise, they'd be oppressed and subjugated by whatever regime it is that's trying to take over this country and oppress it. Might be the Russians, might be the Chinese, who knows in the future. It's all very well for youngsters to say, I wouldn't fight, I'm not fighting for this country, it's a load of rubbish. Well, the reality is they always have and they always will. And these youngsters today would rise to the challenge if they had to.
I hope I wouldn't have used that. Well, certainly I don't remember trying to get any job for my mates.
Can you get a job? Can you help get a job for ex's mates? But don't tell the Foreign Secretary.
I don't think it's completely surprising that the Prime Minister would be so sensitive about the way in which he was dealing with a member of his senior team, and particularly a Director of Communications who's in minute-by-minute contact with the media, that he would want that kept to a very, very tight group of people at the time.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk Breakfast. Welcome. Ian Collins in for Jezza. Just gone 8:30. So much to get through this morning. Kevin Essex says, morning, on numerous visits to Sweden, I was struck by how many people were incapable of wearing a tie because they never learned to tie one for school. I once had to tie a tie for a Swedish pensioner who was going to a funeral. Was that just a random bloke in the street where, excuse me, mate, in Swedish, you couldn't do this tie for me? I only, you know, the whole kind of Windsor knot thing, and is it a double Windsor or a single one of the... I'm still not good at that. I've got the standard school way of doing a tie, which I know is not the correct way of doing a tie. But ties have kind of gone on. If you look at most executives in offices, they don't wear ties these days. It's very much open neck shirt, so it's gone a little bit, but it's still in school. My 12-year-old struggles still with his tie. This in from Julia in Mansfield. It says, morning, Ian. My granddaughter Daisy is joining the Navy on Monday. She's hoping to be a submariner. She's the grand old age of 17 years and 3 months. We're all so proud of her, especially her dad, who served over 20 years in the RAF. Did he not, itch a little bit when she said, I'm going naval and not RAF? There might have been a point there where he thought, are you sure? I think that's brilliant, Julia. Thank you for that. And lots of luck to Daisy, your granddaughter, as she embarks on what I'm sure is going to be an amazing career. We are talking, of course, all things Olly Robbins, Keir Starmer, among other things thrown into the mix here this morning. Let's speak with Guito Harry, former Downing Street Director of Communications. Guito, good morning to you. Nice to have you with us.
Yeah, always nice to be here. I'm a single Windsor guy myself, by the way.
You're a single Windsor, yeah. The double Windsor just gives you a bigger knot, doesn't it?
It's too big.
Which gives you, yes. What's all that about? Nobody wants one of those things. It's just a bit mad. Just talk us through this. The Director of Communications at Downing Street, very powerful position. I've known people who've done this over the years, and of course, you know, you never switch off from it. I remember speaking to one guy that did the job, and he said he'd even set his alarm for the middle of the night to wake up just to check the news, even if he even if his pager or something hadn't gone off. He was just that on it to make sure that he was across everything and there was going to be no landmine that he was going to stand on. So it's a big job. And of course, it's become central to this Keir Starmer story, hasn't it? Because not one, but a few different directors of communication during Starmer's time in the job, and there's been a few, even in the short time he's been there, are connected deeply to this story.
Yes, and basically, just to spell out how bad it is, he's gone through 4 directors of communication, and there's currently a vacancy. And in view of the sort of the display of leadership or lack of from Keir Starmer at the moment, who would want to take that job, knowing that he not only doesn't have your back, but you're the first person he throws under the bus. But one of the greatest revelations yesterday was clearly in an attempt to get rid of one of the 4 who've left. Somebody at number 10 was trying to get them a cushy job as an ambassador abroad, and trying to do that without David Lammy, the Deputy Prime Minister, Foreign Secretary and supposed friend of Keir Starmer, knowing about it. So
yeah, there was a whole stack of questions. Level. Just in that one moment when he talked about Mr. Doyle, who was the man in question, and they thought, well, he's not going to carry on doing this Director of Communications job, so let's get him an ambassadorial role, as if it's a kind of buffet of choice, you know, that you just go for. And I would imagine somebody like Olly Robbins, who's a very diligent public servant, who's done it for years, it's in his DNA, and I think he feels a great, deep respect for the various positions. You don't just hand these things out to any old person because a bloke down the road asks you to. But that's essentially what he was asked to do. And it turns out that the man in question was, I don't know what it is about this government that seem to have a PhD in hiring people that are up close and personal friends with convicted sex offenders. But that was the case here, like it was with Mandelson. And of course, nothing happened. But just extraordinary that they thought that they could slip him into a cushy ambassador gig.
Yeah, and you're right. Matthew Doyle, pleaded the cause of a man who was convicted for downloading child porn.
Yep.
And, has lost the Labour whip in the House of Lords because of that.
As a result,
but he got into the House of Lords, so you can see that. That was one way of looking after him. The other was to try and get him an ambassador job abroad, though he claims he never really wanted that. But it's all sort of, it's not a great picture of how government is run. I don't think, by the way, Olly Robbins is kind of blameless here, because I understood from my time as a director of comms in number 10 that there was a clear traffic light system to a vetting form. You were green if you were a saint, you were red if you got turned down, and most people are orange in that they're not perfect. They've lived a little. Ideally, anyone who gets a senior job in number 10 will have lived a little, but it's a manageable risk. Olly Robbins claimed not to really know of this.
He said he hadn't seen,
and he hadn't seen one in relation to Mandelson. So I didn't leave thinking, God, if only Keir Starmer had cut the civil service a bit of slack, it would all be well with the world. I think there are big problems with the civil service. So I come at it from a slightly different angle, but that doesn't forgive Keir Starmer for the pressure, for the interference, and for the sort of deliberate ignorance. If this really was a case, above all, of ask no questions, hear no lies.
Indeed, and I think I tend to agree with the spirit of what you say there, Guy. So in the sense that what I thought came out of Olly Robbins' evidence yesterday was it sort of exposed some clear, fairly deep and troubling mechanisms within how the department works. Because if that is how it works, as he explained it, that nobody ever gets to really know as it passes through the stages, each person knows a bit less than the previous person, or nothing at all. So you never really get to know the reasons. You just get to know, well, we did flag him on something. What did you flag him? Or we can't tell you what it was. Well, I'm sorry, if you're out playing golf with the president of China every 3 days, I think we need to specifically know that detail. Nonetheless, that's how we're told it was. Let me ask you this, though, Gideon, from a director of communications point of view, going back to September, when the world of journalism knew that there was this issue with the traffic light system, if that's what we want to call it. We know that David Maddox, the independent journalist, put a call in, I think it was a text, over there to Tim Allen, who was the job that you did back then, said, Tim, I've been told by 2 sources now that Mandelson, in fact, did not clear vetting with MI6. The problem was China, not Epstein. Is there any comment on this? And he wrote back and said vetting done in the normal way. Now, had you received that message from a senior journalist when you were there in Downing Street, would you not have either gone, one of two things, you've gone, oh, they've heard, because we already know, or, wow, if a senior journalist is telling me this, there's something in it. I'm going to call a meeting. I'm certainly going to be telling the Prime Minister. I'm going to elevate this, that's the word, to whatever level. I wouldn't just send a message back and leave it done with. My point being is that Downing Street, at that point, if not before, knew something wasn't right.
Yeah, and you kind of guessed it. You know, I've spent most of my life as a journalist, so you've got the instincts of a journalist. And big hand to David for asking a very, very pertinent question then and being fobbed off. I don't think Tim Allen ever worked in journalism, but my natural journalistic curiosity, not to mention what you should do as a civil servant, a public servant in Number 10, I'd have thought, well, is there anything in this? And I'd have asked the Foreign Office. And at the very least, there are some things you cannot say, but if you cannot say them, you explain that you cannot say them, and gone back to David in The Independent and said, I'm sorry, we can't discuss things like this, which would have left it hanging, which would have, rung alarm bells.
Would you have told the Prime Minister?
Well, I'd have tried to get to the bottom of it, and then, if it was clear that there was a bit of an issue here, because you could see in an instant, if that was the case, that he didn't clear vetting, but he was appointed, this was a massive potential explosion, then I would have, yes.
It's a big,
I used to sit down every morning with the Prime Minister, and you say,
of course,
there's something we should check out.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you don't, the Prime Minister, if you had a conversation with the Prime Minister about every question you get from a journalist, you'd be forever sitting on, opposite the Prime Minister, because it would be non-stop. So I get that, you don't trouble the PM with every single sinew and every question that comes forward, but something of this magnitude, and we know from the Robbins evidence yesterday that the desire and the pressure on the Foreign Office to get this guy through because they wanted their man in Washington was absolutely huge. So this would have jumped out. And it would have also jumped out as well, just to add to this, that David Maddox had that story. He got that story from someone. Now, the smart money says he got it from the Cabinet Office. The Cabinet Office should be talking regularly to Downing Street. They don't always do that. He got it from somewhere. So someone was singing like a canary, even if it was only in the Red Lion over a pint.
I think you're probably right that that's exactly where that crucial piece of information was passed on, probably by some sort of special advisor with an agenda. But either way, your job when that question comes in is, partly to protect the Prime Minister, partly so the right things are done. And, I have huge respect for British journalists. They're a nightmare to deal with because they're good at what they do. And that's how it should be when you're in Number 10. I would have actually, hammered away at the Foreign Office or asked the Prime Minister to ask the Foreign Secretary. But one way or the other, I would not have left something like that hanging, because it has blown up massively in their faces.
As somebody who's worked in Number 10, are you constantly putting pressures on other departments, though? Does that go with the territory? I mean, we can obviously single out this particular case, but obviously the civil service, well, the order of events is meant to be the civil service work for the government and what is required and requested. Civil service is like turning an oil tanker around to get something done. They have systems in place that was rather exposed yesterday that are not always not always conducive with the smooth running and the speed that governments need to act at. So is there always that sense of frustration with different departments?
I'll be honest with you, yes, there is a frustration at the pace that political people who come in, knowing that the clock is ticking down to another election, knowing that they've limited time to make an impact, feeling passionately that they want to address the things that are wrong about modern Britain and give this country a fighting chance, the best fighting chance that it has. The civil service can be enormously frustrating. So yes, you do need to sort of put the pressure on for them to sort of up the pace. But that is different from putting pressure on for a different outcome. And again, someone like me would have been very clear that I don't want you dragging your feet on this. Do the vetting, do it as quickly as possible, but tell us what the outcome is. I'm not asking you to sort of fix the vetting. I'm just asking you to get it done quickly. And if the answer is no, the answer is no. The sooner we know, the better. The pressure here seemed to be, and it was obvious because Mandelson had already been announced. He was packing his bags for Washington. The US administration knew, the press knew. So at that point, it's a bit sort of, cart after the horse, kind of cart before the horse, to sort of say, will you actually expedite the vetting? And of course, you come to whatever conclusion you want. That's quite hard.
Indeed. What would Starmer's team be telling him today, do you think?
Well, what's left of them?
Yes.
He's gone through 2 chiefs of staff, 4 directors of communication, vacancies in both. He's lost a head of strategy. He's on his 2nd deputy prime minister. I mean, across the board, whether it's officials, whether it's political appointees, whether it's elected politicians, he's hemorrhaging staff. And this from the man who said he would end Tory chaos. I listened to Pat McFadden this morning. One of the, you've probably interviewed him. He's very shrewd. He's very hard to land a glove on. But he was essentially, the whole feel of it was him raising the white flag. He clearly felt, even though he went through his lines, he survived an interview, but you could see his heart wasn't on it. And I fear they'll go back and they'll sit there and there'll be an awkward silence. And then, in that situation in the past, other people have said, do you think it's all over, guys? And I think for Keir it is.
Would a director of communications or a senior cabinet minister be brave enough to say that to Keir Starmer? Because you mentioned Pat McFadden, of course, so Ed Miliband, similar deal on the TV rounds yesterday, almost rolling over going, it's rubbish. We got it wrong. It's, this is a horrible time to be in government. Will one of them say to Keir Starmer's face, you might need to think about packing your bag?
Often in situations like this, it's the spouse or, a relative or a long friend outside of politics who said, mate, why are you putting yourself through this? It's clearly over. I mean, the truth is, I fear we're all in purgatory. We're stuck with a prime minister who even his closest friends in politics no longer think is capable of doing the job. But we're in purgatory because, the Labour backbenchers can't decide whether they want to, try and go for the heaven of West Streeting or the hell of Angela Rayner. And because of that, they'll stick in purgatory. Not a great place to be, is it?
Or Ed Miliband, you missed from that list, Guito, but that's maybe you just couldn't bring yourself to say it, which I would understand. Which I would understand. Guito, thank you, Guito Harry, former Downing Street Director of Communications. He knows what those jobs are like. I mean, they are perilous and they are literally non-stop. I mean, you want to see your family, don't do that job. I mean, it's kind of the worst of all worlds in so many respects. And you've got to be across so many different briefs. And you're dealing with the press, you're also dealing with the Prime Minister, you're dealing with your own team, you're dealing with events outside of your control, and every minute you think, I can finally sit down. The sort of half-eaten sausage roll and a cup of cold tea, that sits on a director of communications desk all day long. They never get round to having it. So when you've done it, you think, what a great experience I had, regardless of party. But it is a nightmare brief to deal with. It's paid nicely, but it is a nightmare. 0344 499 1000. Loads of comments coming in from you on this. Is Starmer in the clear now? I mean, we're throwing that one out there. It's an obvious question after everything that has happened in the last 7 days. Is that it now? Draw a line under it. Starmer moves on. End of. Or is there much more to come? PMQ's coming. Julia will be covering all of that at around about 12:30 this afternoon. We're also talking about a new poll that says half of young people would never fight for Britain. They don't want to join up to the military in any shape or form. Let's get a voice note on that. It comes from Karen. Morning, Karen.
Hi, Ian. The reason that young people don't want to fight for this country is because they're watching boat after boat after boatload of young fighting age men come over to this country, get put up in 4-star, 5-star hotels, get given money, mobile phones, clothes. They probably wear better clothes than the young people that were born and bred here. It's ridiculous. I've seen them walking around. They're walking around in designer stuff. And, why would you fight for a system that's against you? Especially if you're white and you're a young man. I mean, I feel sorry for young men in this country. They've got no role model to look up to. They don't know what they are or where they are. I certainly wouldn't fight for this country, not after what the governments have done to us. No way. And I don't blame them. And if I was young, I would be leaving in a heartbeat.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, the home of common sense. It is Talk. Good morning. The news agenda absolutely crammed here. We're bringing you all the salient headlines of everything. Of course, crucially, as always, taking your calls and comments on the way as well. Let's get to work with Dominic Grieve, former Conservative MP, former Attorney General too. Dominic Grieve, good morning to you.
Good morning.
I mean, do you miss the deep end of politics at times like this? I mean, it's all happening over at your old workplace, to coin a phrase.
Not sure I do, really. I miss being involved in politics at one level, but on the other hand, you look at what's going on, and I confess I do rather look onto it, and I think, well, what would I be doing any good if I were there? And things are not very good at the moment, and they could be much better.
Yes.
So it's rather frustrating to watch from the outside.
I mean, you know what it's like to be at the centre of a storm, and I'm thinking Brexit, of course. You were very central to that, very much against what had happened back in 2016, and we're a democracy, that's fine. So my point is, rows come and go. They differ in size, they differ in significance. What's happening with Labour at the moment is very serious, though. I think we can certainly file it under a very serious problem. Labour MPs talking about a toxic culture, cracks starting to appear. Cabinet ministers going out, sort of not really defending the party line in the way they might have done a week ago. Are you sensing that?
Yes, that is how it comes across. And of course, it's worth bearing in mind it's all a piece of theatre in one way, because the country's got lots of underlying problems, and none of this actually addresses those underlying problems at all. Although it's right to say that getting how government works right is a very important part of starting to solve the underlying economic and other social problems that this country faces. But it is in some ways a distraction, which is why it's so frustrating to watch, because people are blaming each other. The Prime Minister says that he wasn't told something. The Permanent Secretary explains why it was that, in his view, the whole system by which appointments are made for ambassadors was not being followed properly, and why he took his steps. And this is very depressing to see, because one would like to think that in a mature democracy like the United Kingdom, even if governments don't always get some of the strategic decisions right, they are operating within a system which is working fairly smoothly because it's been tried and tested, which it has. But in fact, it isn't. And there are some lessons, I think, to be learnt from all this, which are quite significant ones. But whether government actually bothers to, I have no idea whether that will happen or not.
Yeah, it was interesting. We got a bit of a glimpse yesterday about that sort of always precarious relationship between the civil service and government over the Peter Mandelson affair, the pressure that Olly Robbins said was upon him and his department when this whole Mandelson thing was going through. Let's just have a little listen, Dominic, to what happened yesterday when one MP posed that very scenario, that very point to Mr Robbins.
McSweeney, the Chief of Staff, rang Sir Philip and said, in terms stronger than those that I can use before the watershed.
I think you should.
Well, I'll just say that it was just to prove it with terms stronger than that.
Just prove it.
Does it accord with your impression when you took over from Sir Philip?
Certainly, Philip's handover to me has contributed to my strong sense that there was an atmosphere of pressure and a certain dismissiveness about this DV process, which I hope I've tried already to be honest with the committee about. I don't remember Philip using those words. Also, I'm proud to say Philip's probably not the sort of person who would report them verbatim.
Well, there we are, Dominic. I mean, we heard it there. We know that, if Thornbury can drop the F-bomb, she will, but that's a separate story. In terms of what was happening there, Number 10 putting pressure on this particular appointment. Of course, Number 10, governments do have to chase up the civil service. That's the cat and mouse game that is that relationship. We'll always say that pressure can be on. This does seem very acute, however, in terms of this constant badgering of the Foreign Office to get this thing done.
Yes, and I pose this question: who's doing the badgering? Well, it's all being done by the special advisor with it, not by the ministers. And I think this highlights to me, I think, a disaster that has come across our system of government. Since Tony Blair came in 1997, the role of special advisors has grown enormously. They are, in a sense, a sort of parallel politicised civil service. And they are actually coming between the relationship between the civil servants and the ministers. And it leads to a complete breakdown in trust. And I also think it leads to the civil servants saying, well, you know, I've done my bit here, it's over to them. And you sense that very slightly with Olly Robbins' remarks that he felt there was nothing more he could do about this appointment because, in a sense, it had been taken out of his hands and that of the Foreign Office. It had been determined at a political level. And so we shouldn't then be surprised that ministers find that the relationship with their civil servants is not working properly, because they are the very people who have created the conditions where this relationship breakdown takes place. And over and over again, this comes back to the special advisors.
Yeah.
And let's face it, this government has a real special advisor problem. The special advisors leak all the time. And I've seen it for my last 12 months with work which I did as a volunteer for government. The work which was being done confidentially for the department for which I was working was leaked the moment it got into the hands of the number 10 special advisors.
Yeah.
And this is happening over and over again. And then
Yeah,
we end up with dysfunctional government.
Clearly hiring the wrong people, maybe. Dominic, thank you for your time, sir. Have a great day. Dominic Grieve, former Tory MP and former Attorney General, with us on the programme. Loads of stuff still to come in the next section. Don't be going in. Do not be going anywhere. It's a busy last hour. 0344 499 1000. One of the other stories this morning was about the condom shortage as a direct result of the Iran war. Let's get a voice note on that very point from Mark. Morning, Mark.
Morning, mate. Mark, Bridge North, on the way to work on a sunny Wednesday. Only a quick one, mate, on the condom shortage. You know what? It's going to be bloody hard for some people.
The position taken from the Cabinet Office was that there was no need to vet Mandelson. He was a member of the House of Lords, he was a Privy Councillor. The risks that attending his appointment were well known and had been made clear to the Prime Minister before appointment. Now, in the end, the FCDO insisted and put its foot down. I understand my predecessor had to be very firm in person. But that was a live debate at the point of announcement, and I think it's important to make that clear.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
this is a scandal, as you say. If the Prime Minister's knowingly lied, any minister, whether it's the most important one, the Prime Minister, or the most junior minister, lying to the House of Commons is a capital offence and would have to go. And if the officials have lied when they're advising you, they should go.
On the 10th of September, the Prime Minister misled Parliament by saying the full due process was followed. If Mandelson failed the security vetting, full due process was not followed. Misleading Parliament is a resigning offence.
The ambassador has repeatedly expressed his deep regret for his association with him. He's right to do so. I have confidence in him, and he's playing an important role in the UK-US relationship.
It was clear that the Prime Minister wanted to make this appointment himself, and had therefore I understand that the FCDO was informed of his decision and acted upon it, and via the Foreign Secretary sought and obtained the King's approval for the appointment.
Even the expectation that Olly Robbins felt quite comfortable, this is what we're being asked to believe.
Yes.
To hold back this information that he knew that he had that Mandelson had failed the vetting process, and that at no stage that it was necessary to tell the Prime Minister.
It's unbelievable. So he either knew and lied on this issue, or he didn't know, and that's just as bad.
Can the Prime Minister tell us, did the official security vetting he received mention Mandelson's ongoing relationship with the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein?
So clear.
This was going to be sped up.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, it is Talk Breakfast. So much to get through. It's Ian Collins in for Jezza. Coming up on 4 minutes after 9 o'clock, as we move into this hour, the news agenda just simply gathers pace. Are we moving to the end game of the Mandelson saga? No, of course we're not. And neither should we be. The studious and quietly spoken Olly Robbins yesterday had his say. Starmer had his say. The one thing we do know, and I'll forever come back to this headline, is that Downing Street knew 7 months ago that the security vetting was a bit iffy, and that's putting it generously. We also know they put a lot of pressure on Olly Robbins. This is just a very ugly scene playing out. Keir Starmer says, I didn't mislead anyone. A lot of journalists, Dan Hodges included, telling us earlier, no, he absolutely did. Can he survive? Is Starmer now in the clear, curiously? And will the Conservatives play a blinder today? Because PMQ's at 12:30. Another opportunity for Kemi Badenoch to ram it home to Keir Starmer. On that point of the Tories, here's a voice note from Pete. Morning, Pete.
Hi, Ian. Pete from Lancashire. Spoke a few times, mate. Reform voter. Do you know what? At the end of the day, why didn't the front benches, back benches say to Starmer, we don't want him. We don't want him. And on the other hand, I really want to vote reform, but I'm actually thinking Conservative at the minute, because every time they stand up in the House of Commons and make a comment, it's a little bit embarrassing, mate. I thought Anderson it was daft what he did on Monday.
It's interesting that Kemi Badenoch's star kind of rising. I don't think she's the full package yet. There's a bit more to be done. Word on the street, David Cameron could be in the wings, giving some crucial advice on this kind of stuff. Whether you love or hate David Cameron, he's very experienced at certainly how to impart a message, and the confidence and the occasional twinkle in your eye. That you've got to have all of those. You've got to tick all those kind of boxes in that job. Kemi Badenoch has got to keep up the pressure for a few years. They need some scalps. They've done well out, if this is the way to look at it, but for the purpose of this conversation, they've done well out of the whole Mandelson stuff, holding the government to account, getting that, certainly information, and those sessions held within the parliamentary system. But they've got to ramp that up. They've got to keep it going. Let's speak with Nigel Evans, former Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons. I was about to say former Conservative, Nigel, but the last time I looked, you are still very much a Conservative, of course. Morning.
Yeah, I'm a card-carrying member of the Conservative Party, Ian. And you're quite right, actually, to point out about Kemi. There's no two ways. I voted for Kemi Badenoch as leader of my party, and I'm really delighted to see that after what I'd say is a shaky start, let's be fair, because they were reflecting on a very, very poor 2024 general election. When I say poor, I mean the worst general election result for the Conservatives in the history of the Tory party. And yet Kemi is holding everything together. She is way more popular than the party, so the party need to catch up quickly.
Yeah, she does stand out. She's clearly very bright. She's found a kind of rhythm at the dispatch box. But as I was saying a second ago, Nigel, I mean, it's sort of work in progress. In today's world, in the world of, you know, any utterance is on social media within half a second. You've got to be on top of your game all the time, not just most of the time.
No, that's right, absolutely. And I think that's what we are seeing from Kemi now. Just look at this week alone. This has been a week of explosives and expletives. Not from Kemi, here's no ad. She just does the explosives bit, so we'll leave Emily Thornberry to do the expletives. But we had the statement on Monday from Keir Starmer, which should have come on Wednesday, but nonetheless, we waited till Monday. And Kemi performed incredibly well then. Then she put in on Monday for an emergency debate. It's called an SO24, and it's the decision of the Speaker whether to hear it. He decided to hear it, and it was granted. And then that took place yesterday at just after when Olly Robbins was giving his incredible evidence to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. And then today, of course, we've got Prime Minister's questions as well, where we know absolutely that Kemi is going to ram home all the unanswered questions or questions that have been raised from yesterday's incredible Olly Robbins evidence session to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee.
Has she got to come up with a new angle, or is that a waste of time? Do you just compound and keep ramming home the big headlines on these things?
Well, I just think there are too many new angles, to be honest. And as long as she keeps pressing at it, I mean, my own view is that Keir Starmer is a political corpse. He is already politically gone. Nobody within the cabinet seems to be brave enough to tell him. Maybe they have to wait until the stench becomes so bad before somebody taps him on the shoulder. At least in the Tory party, we have a way of doing it with the 1922 committee. But clearly the Labour Party, a little bit sort of backward in all of this. For me, Ian, it all goes back to the revelation that Sir Simon Case, the Cabinet Secretary, said to Keir Starmer early doors, before any announcement was made. He said, listen, if you're going to make a political appointment to the ambassador to the United States of America, let me know the name. We'll start the vetting process so that you get to know if there's any conflicts of interest, we can sort them all out. Instead of which, he decided, and that was on the 11th of November, 2024.
Yep.
Now, either Starmer ignored it or rejected the advice, because we know that on the 20th of December, the announcement was made. And it's not as if there was any rush either, Ian, because, of course, you had Dame Karen Pierce, who was the ambassador for us in Washington. She was incredibly popular with Donald Trump. Keeping her there longer would not have been a problem until proper due process had been finished. But we now know that was not the case. And the explosive evidence yesterday by Olly Robbins, where he basically said, number 10 said, just get it expletive done.
Yep.
Means the enormous amount of pressure that was on the civil service, just basically to get Peter Mandelson properly endorsed. It'd already been announced on the 20th of December 2024. The King had already agreed it. America had already agreed it. We now know that he was in receipt of security information, of national security stuff, which was on a case-by-case basis. And then all of a sudden, on I think it was the 28th of January 2025, when effectively he did not pass vetting. And what we got to know yesterday is that Olly Robbins did not see that recommendation. He was just told that they were leaning against him, but the reality was they did go against him. And on the 29th, he was absolutely endorsed. And at some stage then after, he got given the highest level of security briefing, that you could read all sorts of stuff. And so there are a ton of questions, but why didn't Keir Starmer follow the advice of Sir Simon? Because do you know now, basically as a reaction to what's gone on, Keir Starmer has said, we've changed the rules. He told us on Monday, we've changed the rules. Do you know, Ian, they've changed the rules back to what Sir Simon had advised him. If only he'd followed that advice. We got an drift yesterday from Olly Robbins, who said if only the Prime Minister had basically listened to what everybody was saying.
And we now know, subsequently, that, and this is as a result of the Epstein files, and that's, of course, another facet to this whole story that's yet to be fully come out, because we await what the police conclude. But we know that Mandelson can sing like a canary to an outsider, even when he's in a sensitive position, because we've seen those email exchanges between him and Epstein when Mandelson was the business secretary, de facto deputy prime minister. He was mailing information that should never have gone outside four walls of Downing Street to a complete stranger in another country. So he was a security risk. The idea that Downing Street were quite relaxed about this man getting, almost suggesting even after Sir Simon Case had made those recommendations, just get this thing done. Does he even need security? It really does expose the ineptitude of this current administration.
Yeah, and yesterday again we learned that the Foreign and Commonwealth Office pushed number 10 to say, no, he's got to go through vetting. They were saying he doesn't need vetting. He's a member of the House of Lords. He is a member of the Privy Council. He doesn't need it. And essentially it was pushed back by the Foreign Office, quite rightly so, that there should be proper vetting. But it's what Olly Robbins said when he said they were dismissive about the vetting procedure. And then we got that sense from what he said then when number 10 said, just get it done with an expletive. And now, of course, we know that Emily Thornberry is going to get Sir Philip Barton, who is the predecessor to Olly Robbins. He's going to have to give evidence. Morgan McSweeney may well be called to give evidence as well. This story is just going to go on and on and on. And quite frankly, another zinger, by the way, when we talk about Kemi, was that it was her humble address that insisted that all the files were made public, unless, of course, they were of a national security issue, in which case they go to the Intelligence and Security Committee. And if it hadn't been for her pressing that, then that would never have happened. And so we are now privy to way more information, Ian, than otherwise would be the case. And I never thought I'd say this on your programme, but 3 cheers for the Guardian newspaper, because they were the ones that broke the story last Thursday. And it does beg the question, had the Guardian not broken the story, would we be having this conversation now? Would, at any stage, Keir Starmer had come to the House and apologised for misleading the House in the way that he did?
Indeed, and it even predates that, of course, because back in September, we know that The Independent had also flagged to Downing Street that they were hearing rumblings of the security clearance or the security vetting being a little bit questionable, if nothing else. So somebody somewhere already knew something. As you rightly say, The Guardian went on to expose it. And I wonder whether Starmer's response, where he kind of lost his mind and said, this cannot happen, I was not told, I wonder if that's on the back of those subsequent revelations about the Mandelson emails that came out with him having conversations about government business to Epstein. Because of that, Starmer instinctively felt, right, I've got to sound really big on this. I've got to sound like, no, this would never happen under my watch. But, of course, in doing so, he might have inadvertently unfairly dismissed a senior civil servant who could well have a case on his hands now.
He may well do, and this is exactly where it may go. No, you're quite right. In September, just after Mandelson was sacked, it was David Maddox of the Independent newspaper who put on the front page, failed security. Maddox had got in touch with number 10.
So how could number 10 have not known?
Yeah, well, they told him, no, all due process had been followed. Well, the reality now, Ian, is we know that this is not usual process.
Doesn't make sense. If a senior journalist, Nigel, has contacted Downing Street to say, I've got information on this, it wasn't like Bob in Arbroath suddenly made a call to Downing Street and said, a bloke on the bus suggested that. It wasn't that. This was a respected Westminster political journalist asked a question. When somebody like that raises a question, somebody at the other end should either go, whoops, we've been rumbled, or whoops, we didn't know this, so we better investigate because somebody knows it. At that point, Downing Street knew. because they were literally told.
Yeah, well, I think the reality is that nobody in number 10 was sufficiently curious enough to ask the questions. Why? Because they'd already made the decision that Peter Mandelson was going to become the ambassador to the United States of America. They'd already announced it on the 20th of December, prior to even the vetting starting, because the vetting didn't start till the 23rd of December 2024. The King had already agreed it, and the United States had already agreed it as well. So they had every opportunity to have allowed proper vetting to have taken place prior to the announcement. The buck actually does now stop at number 10. It does stop with Keir Starmer. He's run out of buses and run out of people to throw under them, Ian.
Yeah.
He's blamed everybody but himself, but he has to take responsibility for this. The buck does stop with him. It's not as if people didn't know that putting Peter Mandelson into that position was not risky. He was told time and time again, but he refused to follow the guidance. And now he is saying that, oh, actually, there's new guidance. No, the guidance was sufficient if they'd only followed it. He decided that he wanted that person there. Olly Robbins knew that he had to deliver it. When he was asked yesterday, could he have stopped Peter Mandelson from becoming ambassador, he said, well, it was just too difficult. They'd already made the announcements.
Yeah. Just to go back to where we began, Nigel, we're getting a lot of calls from people. We had a voice note earlier talking about the Conservatives and whether they're kind of, he was a Reform voter and said, I'm now looking maybe at the Conservatives. Are they back in business? It got us thinking as well. We were thinking off air about this too, about the days of the coalition, those 5 years, and they were definitely 5 years, of course, because that was part of the deal of being a coalition at Lib Dem's request, 5-year fixed-term parliament. I always thought that era was quite interesting. It never felt fully to me like a government in the conventional sense. But I was always aware that you had one side or the other always there with the handbrake of excess that they could pull if they felt the other side was going too far down a certain line. There was something quite adult about it, even if it wasn't perfect. What was your experience of those heady days, 2010 to 2015, or did it all go by in such a flash? If you were there and you can recall it, you weren't really there. That old phrase. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I was there, definitely. I remember being in the Q committee when David Cameron came in 2010 and said, listen, I know I promised a referendum on Brexit, but I'm afraid as part of the deal with the Lib Dems, we're going to have to shelve that. And he asked for our backing. And of course, he did get that backing because we wanted to take over from Gordon Brown. Yeah. And actually, I saw Ian, people must pine for those days of David Cameron and Nick Clegg in the stability that it was providing during that period of time. I mean, I was never any great fan of the Fixed Term Parliament Act. I always believed that the Prime Minister ought to have that ability to call an early election. And if you recall, going to 2019, when Boris Johnson wanted to call an early election, it was Jeremy Corbyn who was stopping him because of the Fixed Term Parliament Act. Well, now we've scrapped all of that. Yeah. But I guess it begs another question as well, which is what is going to happen? It's still early days, and this government, Starmer won't be leading it soon, but this government could limp on until 2029. And what would the result of the general election going to be? But all the reality and all the opinion polls are showing that it's election roulette, because most of the major political parties are on 20-something%. Yeah, Kemi Badenoch is catching up with Reform. I think the last poll I saw, there was only 3% between them. And I think that if Kemi can just get it over and beyond where Reform are, then I think you're going to reach a tipping point. And people like Peter from Lancashire that we just heard from, I think that is going to be the norm. People are going to say, actually, there's something about Kemi Badenoch. My goodness me, isn't she having an incredible time at the moment? She really is holding the government to account. That is the job of the official opposition, and she's doing it in such a sparkling way.
I'm hearing rumblings that David Cameron is kind of, I wouldn't say on the payroll, but he's certainly throwing in more than a bit of advice to the Tory front bench, particularly Kemi Badenoch. Are you hearing anything of that nature, Nigel?
Yeah, I'd heard something like that too. And I think it's absolutely right. She ought to be taking advice from wherever she can. whether it's David Cameron or whether it's William Hague. I mean, we've got a number of people there who could give Kemi the advice. But at the end of the day, you know, Ian, when you stand at that dispatch box, it's a pretty lonely place in the House of Commons, even though you're surrounded by hundreds of other people. You really have got to shine yourself. You really got to have your wits all about you. You've got to be able to think on your feet. And that's what we're seeing with Kemi. And of course, she's grounded in what she believes in. She's an absolute Tory. Now, I know some people have reflected badly on some of the previous leaders that we've had, and people question whether they're proper Conservatives. I've got to tell you, got the real deal with Kemi Badenoch. I knew her when she and I sat on the 1922 committee. I've spoken with her. I know what her views are. I remember when she was doing the equalities job, she didn't take any flannel. She did it as it was. There was no wokery. She just, equality of opportunities is what you're going to get, but you're not going to get any preferential treatment simply because of the color of your skin or because you happen to be a woman or you're LGBT, whatever it is. You've got equality of opportunities, what you're going to get. And Kemi is just a straight sort of person. What you see is what you get. And that's what I rather like about her. And that's why I voted for her.
Indeed. Nigel, listen, great to have you on as ever. We are going to be speaking again very soon. Of course, Nigel Evans, former Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons, former Conservative MP. His assessment as well of Kemi Badenoch. Naturally, that is his position. Kemi was his choice as leader. Are you sensing a turnaround for the Conservatives? And if you are, is it at the expense of Reform UK? That's an interesting debate in itself. 0344 499 1000. Loads of calls and comments coming in on that, as there is on Olly Robbins and Keir Starmer and all of that. It ain't over yet. Let's get a word on that very point. A voice note from Alan. Morning, Al.
Morning, Ian. Big Al from Swansea. My take off for yesterday with Olly Robbins. So the question is, why was he asked to leave? Because he was pushing back against get this vetting through without any questions, ifs, buts, and whatevers. Olly Robbins has been in now. He started push back. Ooh, he's out of the way. It stinks of fish, pal. There's too much skullduggery. And let's hope Kemi holds him account today in Prime Minister's questions. But this charlatan in number 10, he thinks he's above everything, but karma's come in. The days of, one me, sir, don't know what's going on, didn't pass my desk. It's running out, pal. Keep up the great show. Ta-ra.
Handover briefing I was getting as I arrived at post was what I felt was a generally dismissive attitude to his vetting clearance. The focus was on getting Mandelson out to Washington quickly. Despite this atmosphere, an atmosphere of pressure, the department completed developed vetting to the normal high standard. Because the vetting process is not there to determine fitness for office or reputational risk, it's there to protect national security.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, welcome back. Ian Collins in for Jezza. Loads of... we've got a variety. We've cast the net so wide this morning. There should almost be an Ofcom complaint of over-choice of what to debate, including school uniform. Phil says, in uniform, everyone is the same. It's about respect. Shirt tucked in, tie done properly, so nobody will mock me in my Primani tracksuit while they're in their Adidas trackie. I had Woolworths football boots as a kid. That's how old I am. Endless mockery. I didn't even know Woolworths did football boots. I had no idea. I do remember when Green Flash was a big thing. Do you remember Green Flash? Called Green Flash? They were white with, well, green. I don't know. Was Green Flash a label? Was it a make? I have no idea. But for a bit, that was a bit of a thing. Andrew in Salisbury. Why would people fight for this country? It feels like it's already been invaded. Some people hate the country, yet they milk it for all it's worth, and others live here, yet call it racist, a racist hellhole. Britain has an identity crisis. That's a very good point. Britain has an identity crisis. There's a line we could probably throw the phone lines open on that for ages. Counter-terror police have arrested 7 people suspecting of plotting an arson attack on a Jewish target. The arrests in Harpenden and Stevenage, Hertfordshire, and in Birmingham were part of a proactive investigation into an alleged conspiracy to commit arson. A Scotland Yard spokesman said that while the intended target was believed to be related to the Jewish community, the specific location was not known. In a moment, Jonathan Hall, KC, will speak with us. First, Danny Stone, CEO of Anti-Semitism Policy Trust. Morning to you, Danny.
Morning. Thanks for having me on.
It's lovely to see you as well. I mean, I'm sort of going to sound like a stuck record here, but it's just worth putting this out here, that here we are in the 21st century, and I base this on if you look at the Jewish story, history, the Holocaust, post-war, assimilation in this country, and here we are in 2026 discussing what appears to be, what clearly is demonstrably an ongoing and increasing issue of anti-Semitism. How the heck did we get here?
Well, it's very depressing, isn't it? I mean, the Jews were kicked out of England and readmitted in the 1600s. So there's been formal representation of the community ever since 1760. But ever since that time, there's been anti-Semitism. But in recent years, in the past 2 to 3 years, we've seen the highest levels on record, which is shocking and distressing. And at present, where are the anti-racist demonstrations? Where are people standing in solidarity? You've given due prominence to this issue on your programme, but there's a huge absence of anti-racist solidarity at the moment. How do we get here? It's difficult to tell, but certainly what this looks like is state-backed action to try and recruit thugs to attempt to commit arson attacks on synagogues and other Jewish locations. Yeah. And it's obviously a very frightening time.
Indeed, state-backed being Iran.
Yes, exactly. So certainly that was in the debate in the House of Commons this week. It was Iran that the finger was pointed to, and the Security Minister, Dan Jarvis, was very clear that anyone who was tempted by money from a state or other kind of linked group would be met with the full force of the law if they decided to carry out criminal activity.
We do live in strange times, because there is a kind of... We often talk about immigration on this programme and small boats crossing the channel. I don't think it's irrelevant to raise the fact that Iranians have formed part of, I think it's 70% of the largest cohort. They're part of that, who have come over the years on small boats. You might think, given what is happening in the Middle East, given what we're talking about, given the increase in anti-Semitism, given the fact that it is evidently clear that Iranians are represented on those boats on a regular basis, you might think somebody was joining the dots here a little bit and going, well, just to be safe, I'm pretty sure the average Iranian on a boat means no harm to anyone, but we just don't know that for a fact. If you're coming in without passport and papers, then we need to take a closer look.
We asked government about absorption some time ago about what happens when people are coming to the UK. And the answer was you get a PowerPoint in country before you leave, and then you have a local authority officer who is your kind of point person. So this is legal migration that I'm talking about. So even on that front, I'm concerned that there aren't the systems in place to identify anti-Semitism. Remember, people will be coming, you mentioned Iran, people will be coming from Syria where there's state-backed anti-Semitism in the media and the press.
So if it's about hiring somebody with bad intent, I mean, I would suggest there's a reasonable pool of
any of the system.
Yeah. So we lost you there for a second, Danny. Stay with us, Danny.
It may well be.
Yeah. Danny Stone, don't go away. I want to bring in Jonathan Hall Casey, independent reviewer of terrorism legislation as well. Jonathan, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Would it be fair to say, I mean, like all legislation, it's the law is not a rigid thing that just stays in one place. It's not stationary, it moves around, it morphs, it's labyrinthine, but it's ever adapting to new circumstances. And I would imagine terrorism legislation is right up there in that sense, because we see terrorism, if you were asked to define terrorism 20 years ago, I think that might be different to what answer you might give today.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I think this is probably edging towards national security laws. So there are two laws that operate. There's the terrorism legislation that people are unfortunately familiar with. And then three years ago, the National Security Act came in, which recognised that hostile states, and I'm going to say that Iran is a hostile state for these purposes, will be looking for proxies. Some of those people will be fully aware that they are helping a foreign intelligence service. Some people will be less aware, but the National Security Act is designed to catch them too. Now, I'm going to make the assumption that Al-Yamin, which is this group that has claimed responsibility, is Iran-backed. But on that assumption, then I think that the National Security Act is actually a better fit for what these people are doing, because what you really want the law to do is to send a very deterrent message to people who are tempted to carry out arson for hire.
Is this entirely new on our shores, this idea? I mean, obviously, you know, that terrorists act in accordance with whatever cause they have, whether you're looking at the IRA, whether you look at ISIS or whoever, you know, people shouting religious slogans as they blow themselves up, or other people, etc. But is this idea of thugs for hire, as it's being called, which slightly underplays it because it gives it a slight satirical vibe, and there's nothing funny about any of this, but you take the point. Is that entirely new in our system?
It's not entirely new because it's straight out of the KGB playbook.
Sure.
I mean, there's some. I read a fascinating article recently about sabotage through the ages. It is an incredibly effective tactic for a foreign intelligence service to use. It's plausibly deniable. It has a big, what they call cognitive effect. It makes people feel really bad and scared. You just don't quite know what's going on. And it can divide people because people point fingers in all sorts of different directions. So if you want to undermine a state, it could be in times of war when you're trying to destroy their sort of depots and their transport systems, but it can also just be to try and destroy the morale. It's a very effective and well-worn technique. So that's not new. What is new is that countries like Russia in particular and Iran in particular are being much more bold now than they used to be, which means that as a country we have to hit back and we have to be more resilient.
Jonathan, thank you for your time. Jonathan Hall Casey, and a word again from Danny Stone from the Anti-Semitism Policy Trust. I mean, I guess the ultimate question, Danny, is do you have enough faith in our system, and I guess our system being our government and the appointed authorities that they put into place, to give this the correct and serious response that it needs? Anti-Semitism is on the rise. It's potentially lethal. We know that it's been more than disruptive. Lives are being put at risk. Is it being taken seriously enough by the powers that be?
Well, I'm from here. I'm going to a meeting, a cross-departmental meeting with government, where we will both be hearing about what they're doing and seeking to push them to go further. Government published a social action, a social cohesion plan, and there are a number of measures in there that we want to see implemented. So the words are good, and the words have been strong and firm. but it must be followed by action, and we need to see that direct action from government to be confident that this will be dealt with.
Indeed. Danny, thank you for your time. Good luck with that meeting as well. Danny Stone, CEO of the Anti-Semitism Policy Trust, with us here on the programme. 0344 499 1000. Lot of comment in on this and other issues as well. Sharon says, this is reference, you know, the portrait, I don't know if you clocked this story, the Treasury, Rachel Reeves, commissioned an artist to come and draw a picture of her, which is a bit weird because it cost £3 grand. It didn't cost her £3 grand, it cost us £3 grand. And this was, I think it was on the day of her budget. It was the budget of doom last November. And there she is, sitting on her Treasury sofa with her ministerial book and her red box in the distance, looking very... Well, I don't know what she looks really. It's just a picture of Rachel Reeves on a sofa. It's a very vanity project. Sharon says, why the hell should taxpayers pay £3 grand for a portrait of that awful woman? Why didn't she pay for it herself? You'd think something like that, when they sit down and have the meeting, there's a cost of living crisis. Somebody somewhere would have signed that off and gone, painting of the Chancellor, yeah, no problem, Governor. £3 grand, ka-ching, away you go. Really? We also mentioned sportswear in the classroom. Should kids be allowed to wear tracksuits rather than school uniform? This is an MP's suggestion that it will give a greater sense of balance in the classroom, get kids being more active, really. I raised the issue of green flash trainers. And so has Dave. Morning, Dave.
Collins, Dave at Manchester again. It's Dunlop green flash. How double dare you? Dunlop.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This in from Ronald it's Ronald Wood in Newcastle upon Tyne, who says, I have to stick up for the youngsters. Why would you want to go to war for Keir Starmer or any current politician? To be honest, it's not an unreasonable point. We were talking about the fact that a new poll says that half of young people say they would never fight for Britain. They just wouldn't. A loss of faith in country or a simple generational difference. Which one is it? We've got a lot to get through. We're also talking about school uniforms too. This one from Cliff, who says, you must remember that many left school at 14, this is reference war, I apologise, joining the military, left school at 14, so they felt more like adult men sooner. Of course, back then, men were men, so not so feminised by the education system. You can't say men are men. I said that on I can't remember what the story was, but there was some big kind of sexism story that was out there. It was something on TV, somebody had done something and the world lost its mind over sexism. And then separate to that, I just happened to utter on air something about when men were men, and oddly it was actually quite tongue-in-cheek. And it got picked up, it got a bit of traction. I think one of the newspapers decided to quote it as an example of modern day, what do they call it, everyday sexism. Wasn't a book written about that, I think, and there was a Twitter feed about that. You can't just put everything you disagree with down to an ism. Sometimes it might be, often it won't be. Pupils wearing tracksuits. Let's get a word on this from Serge Caffey, executive head teacher at St Thomas's, the Apostles' School. Is it Serge or Serge, should I say? Good morning to you.
It's just Serge, Ian.
So I was right the first time. Didn't even have to correct myself, did I? What are you making of all of this then? Because the theory that MPs have come up with is that the tracksuit is tracksuit and trainers. It's a freer way. It's a more obvious way to get kids more active. Are they right?
Yeah, of course they're not, because once again, the headline betrays a real lack of understanding of what a school uniform is for and what it's about. It doesn't mention age of kids, of course. 5-year-olds can wear what they like. They're not really aware of the latest designer tracksuit, etc., etc. The older they are, the more important a uniform policy is. I think we need to find a new collective noun for some of these MPs when they sit together.
I've got a few.
Well, I tell you what, I bet I have, because they really don't understand. There's a whole, idea of going to school. For a start, I'm a secondary school head, etc. I know, but one of my biggest challenges is preparing my kids for the world of work. And whether we like it or not, in certain areas of work, you're going to have to wear appropriate dress. And then, of course, you've got the old tracksuit idea. Well, tracksuits are when they do PE. You want the kids to change to go and do physical activity. You want them getting used to a little bit of hygiene, etc. All these are lifelong lessons. But the biggest thing, if you have a free-for-all for anything the kids wear at school, it does the opposite of inclusivity. It excludes children. Clearly, these bunch of MPs haven't looked at the latest price of tracksuits. We know all the designer makes. God forbid a kid should come into school with a lesser make. It's a breeding ground for bullying, etc., which is why we've got strict uniform codes. I agree with the older price. I don't want schools making a money venture of their uniform, etc. But a strict uniform code, it's a sense of belonging, a sense of community. It's an equalizer, and they can forget about what they're wearing and get on with learning, which is what they're there for.
100%. It's a great phrase. It's an equaliser, Serge, isn't it? And you're absolutely right. I've got a 12-year-old boy. He won't wear a pair of trainers that he wore 4 months ago because they're now out of fashion, and he thinks, if I wore that, I'd be laughed at. So the idea of him going to school and having to go through that process every day, whether it's the hoodie, the sweatshirt, pair of trousers, tracksuit, it could be even socks, for goodness sake. It could be everything.
And I have to say, 15, 20 years ago, when I first became head, you have mufti days, don't you? Well, I've banned them from my schools. I realised then, school can be a cruel place. If you happen to wear the wrong thing on mufti day, you get pillaged for years, perhaps. I'm not even a great fan of book days anymore. I know they're younger kids, etc. But when children are allowed to dress up, we've got some very rich parents who spend hundreds of pounds to make sure their little darlings go in looking like Snow White or whatever it is. People forget, therefore, that there are poorer families who can't afford that sort of thing. And of course, we've had this argument with the 3-item cap. That's not bad. They could have been a bit cleverer about it and just put a money base on it. That a pair of school uniform mustn't cost more than a given amount. Because if you say 3 items, well, 1 item could cost 200 quid. I know schools that, make a hell of a lot of money because they can only buy the blazer at school and it costs that amount of money. But once again, the idea you're going to get anybody having some deep thinking about the impact of simple thing like uniform in schools. I've given up on anyone understanding about education, certainly from the political class. But it's shallow. I don't even know how it's got as far as you, quite frankly, as a story, but it does give you an indication of how little understanding these politicians that have an effect on our lives understand about maybe a lot of things, but certainly education.
Just remind us, if you know, Serge, where did the term mufti come from?
No idea.
Nobody seems to know. Yeah.
Most probably Americanized, you know, but I don't care. I don't have them anymore. I don't think overall there's other ways of raising money for charity.
I think there absolutely is. In terms of strictness on uniform, I mean, there's a couple of things that seem to have gone through all generations. I've never worked it out. As an adult of mates who've got, I haven't got daughters, but mates who've got daughters, the idea to make your completely reasonable skirt almost into a belt, as short as you can get it. That seems to be a thing that teenage girls like to do. The monkeying around with your tie is another one. At one point it's skinny like an old mod tie, then it became really thick and short. Does all that stuff still go on, and how strict are you on it?
It does a bit. The skirt thing, I find really, really annoying. I mean, it wasn't long ago that we had a great big campaign about upskirting. Well, the way some of these girls wear their skirts, you don't need to upskirt.
Yeah.
You know, I don't like it. In my schools, the girls have a choice of wearing trousers or skirts, and if they're going to wear skirts, it's going to be knee high.
Yep.
You know, there are ways around it, but quite frankly, it's up to the school. Any rule you bring in must be enforced, and enforced correctly, and get the parents on board. Otherwise, they can go to another school if they want to wear a different uniform.
Yeah.
You know, it's as simple as that, but it falls into, you know, don't make rules that you can't enforce. And that's where, you know, you can talk about mobile phones here now. You know, I've been collecting them in for 15 years. It's quite simple. They come in the morning, you collect them in the morning, and you give them at the end of the day. They want to break that rule, it gets confiscated. And yet we've had, I don't know how many conversations we've had about mobile phones. And of course, the biggest problem is the owners of the mobile phones, which aren't the children. It's the parents that are paying the fees. You know, they're the ones that need to control it. But of course, no one wants to talk about that. And we end up with politicians just getting a little bit of airtime.
Yeah,
talking
it's all
about things they know nothing about.
Yeah. Spot on. Listen, Serge, great to have you on. Thank you. Serge Caffey, who's the executive head teacher at St Thomas's the Apostle School. Thank you to him. It was always when you're at school, I get it, putting a school uniform on can be a pain. Christian, our producer, was saying their old headmaster banned girls from wearing shiny shoes because their pants would reflect in the shoes. Never even thought about that. And that was something as a teenage boy you would have thought about back in the day. But that's how strict some teachers are. So there's the school skirt thing, there's the tie thing, people messing around. Do you ever remember the ink pen bursting in your inside pocket of your blazer? I mean, that would happen as well. Although, to be honest, I wasn't really a blazer wearer, and I envied the kids that were, because they had... but they were always a bit swatty because our school had a choice on whether you wear the blazer or not. At my boys' school, it's compulsory to wear a blazer, which comes back to the cost of things. How many blazers do you get through in 5-7 years at secondary school? Quite a few, which is why most schools, not all, do the reuse, because you can wear a blazer for half a term. I've grown out of it. You're not going to throw that away. It's only of use to somebody else, to another kid that goes to that school. So we always try and sort of pass it down and make sure that someone else gets use of it and utilise the system at the other end as well. Why would you not? I mean, these things are not going to be forever. And most people don't tend to keep their school uniform as a sort of memento. Or do they? Maybe they do. 0344 499 1000. More comment from you on the way. Julia's going to be popping in as well to tell us a bit more about what is going on her programme as well. Dave in South Gloucestershire says Nigel is expressing wishful thinking. This is Nigel Evans, former Speaker of the House of Commons, former Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons, former Conservative MP was the phrase I was looking for. He says, Kemi is not the Conservative Party. She's just the acceptable face of conservatism, being allowed to deliver strong words and pledges. But if they regain power, would the party itself allow her to implement her promises? The old anti-Brexit Liberal left sections are still there. and will prevent any of the tough actions needed to deal with our major issues. Blair was the accessible face of socialism, but the old regressive ideology won through in the end, with economic ruin, mass national debt and unemployment. I fear this splintering of the centre-right vote and the wavering of the gullible vote will result in a hideous left-wing coalition, or worse still, another term under Marxist state control. There is a very real danger if your flavour of politics is centre-right, so you're looking at reform, you're maybe looking at the Conservatives, that's your kind of ballpark, then you kind of know what you've got, that kind of choice. It could become some kind of coalition, maybe come an election. On the left, it's slightly more disturbing. And disturbing in terms of just the numbers, because you have the Labour Party, you have the Green Party, you have your party, which is Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana, and then you have the Lib Dems as well. Don't discard them from all of this. Now, between those, they could potentially, because there are some Tories who, I don't understand. Tories who go Lib Dem, I've never understood. I don't get it. I don't know what that journey, that trajectory, or where you go, well, I'm currently a Tory, but I'm going to become a Lib Dem. I don't know what that is, but there's lots of it. Where I live, there's a lot of that going on. But the left would have the greater collection of parties, and therefore, by definition, the greater number of supporters. So whilst the average sort of Tory-like Lib Dem would not think they had anything in common with the Corbynites or certainly the Green Party, there's enough in the Venn diagram to nudge them over the line. Curious times. Let's get a call in from Anne in Sussex. Anne, morning to you.
Good morning.
Morning. What are you thinking?
By the way,
yes,
don't vote Lib Dems or Greens, so not telling anyone else what to vote.
Well, I mean, you can vote whatever you like, of course, because there are elections coming up on May the 7th, and everybody should check their local details to find out who that wide range of candidates are, Anne. I'm just saying that for legal reasons. But it's true.
I was a Lib Dem, but I was originally a lonely Liberal.
You were a Lib Dem. It was you.
The reason I rang you was because what is going on with Starmer and Olly Robbins, all of this, is he seemed to have been in post for such a short time. So what was going on before he was in post? Who was involved then? You know, I'm concerned what's been going on that we will not hear about. Obviously, it was a token gesture. Let's get him in by any means. But there's a lot of things that raise a lot of questions in the public's mind in my book that we're not going to hear about.
What is your biggest concern?
My biggest concern is that this government seems set out to destroy what was the best of our nation.
Yeah.
To reduce us to nothing. In the end, we have no pride, and we're the laughing stock. Well, if we're not already, we will be around the world. The respect for what was called Great Britain is disappearing fast, and it seems that we'll follow whichever country has got any crazy scheme going.
Yep.
We're not interested in what has made this a country for people to come to from all over the world to be safe, because now it is no longer a safe country.
Isn't that sad? It feels no longer a safe country, says Anne in Sussex. Thank you to her. Back to more comment from you. Julia with us in just a couple of moments' time, coming up on 5 to 10. This is Talk.
a position taken from the Cabinet Office was that there was no need to vet Mandelson. He was a member of the House of Lords, he was a Privy Councillor. The risks that attending his appointment were well known and had been made clear to the Prime Minister before appointment. Now, in the end, the FCDO insisted and put its foot down. I understand my predecessor had to be very firm in person. But that was a live debate at the point of announcement, and I think it's important to make that clear.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
I didn't get a chance to thank, I think it was Dave who voice noted in that Green Flash were Dunlop, of course. Did Dunlop still make trainers? Also, the route of Mufti Day. Kevin's in Portsmouth. Help us out on this one, Kev. We've not got long, but I'm sure you can do it.
Good morning, Ian.
Morning.
I think it's an old army term from the Indian Army.
Okay.
And I believe it was something to do with Indian clothing.
Is that right?
It might have been like, for instance, I don't know, let's say trousers, or you can have drain pipes, you can have trackies, you can have flares and so on and so forth, but trousers are trousers. So it's something along those lines, and lots of weird things came in from the Indian Army. Another term is geldi, which is hurry up.
Okay.
So all sorts of funny stuff.
What a lovely little lesson to complete the show on. Kevin, I'm grateful for that. Thank you. Kevin in Portsmouth, from Mufti to Tufty. Do you remember Tufty?
I don't know where we're going with this.
Do you remember Tufty, the road safety campaign thing?
No.
You don't remember that?
No, I mean, I don't know.
You're about 15
maybe I'm
years
too young.
older than me. How can you not know
That
this?
escalated quickly.
Didn't know hanging around here. Tufty was the square. They did, for some reason, they decided.
That must
in
be
order to
too
give
young
kids
for me.
Green Cross code.
I had the Green Cross code, but I had the big Hulk, the guy in green.
Yeah, that was years later.
Oh, okay. All right then. Anyway.
They decided to use a squirrel to teach road safety. I mean, really? Of all things, squirrel. Got the worst track record of road safety. Let's get a squirrel.
Next, badgers. Anyway, talking about road safety, I wonder if Keir Starmer